Chapter 22. Precedent? That was before me. I don't know what those seniors who were in charge of the Hero Gathering Hall were thinking. However, in my hands, I definitely won't allow it. Moreover, the sect leader has given orders that our Ling Yun sect definitely won't interfere in the battles of Donglin Cloud Continent. Liang Miaozi's voice suddenly turned cold, fiercely throwing the token back. I'll return this token to you. If you have any problems, you can come and ask. However, as long as I'm here, I definitely won't allow those trash who don't take the proper path to enter our sect. If you want to enter our sect, it's actually really simple. You just need to pass the test. Huang Yi frowned, not daring to retort, only looking back at the three of them apologetically. Zhongshu's expression was as cold as ice from start to finish. Yin Yang, who was standing in front, was so furious that his body was trembling. However, after a short while, he gritted his teeth and knelt down, bowing towards Liang Miaozi. Celestial Elder's words are true. Yin Yang also knows that this matter is a little too much. However, my prince has no way out and can only seek protection from Ling Yun's sect. Celestial Elder, please make an exception. When Su Chu Shui saw the situation, she hurriedly knelt down. She didn't know what to say and could only look towards Liang Miaozi and Huang Yi with pleading eyes. At this moment, Zhongshu had nearly broken his teeth from gritting them. It was like a flame was burning in his chest, and he couldn't hold it in. In his last life, be it in the real world or the virtual world, he had gone against Ling Yun's sect for tens of years. He had never lowered his head to them and admitted defeat. This Yin Yang and Chu Shui had pretty much thrown away all his face. Thinking about it again, he sighed inwardly. Didn't the two of them give up everything for him, the Gantian Mountain Prince? They didn't care about their dignity at all, even if they weren't doing it for him. He couldn't help but feel touched and sad. After all, he had 13 years of memories from this body. To a certain extent, he and the Zhongshu of the past were one. Make an exception? In this world, not everything could be accommodated. Liang Miaozi's expression didn't change at all. Instead, a hint of mockery appeared on his face. This girl's talent isn't bad. Cultivating in both martial arts and spiritual martial arts, his achievements were extraordinary. If you're willing to join our sect, you can directly become an inner sect disciple after the examination. If there's nothing else, you can all leave the mountain. Yin Yang didn't say anything else. He just kowtowed heavily. His forehead hit the blue stone and made a sound like muffled thunder. Su Chu Shui also followed suit. In just a moment, her snow-white forehead was already badly mutilated. Zhongshu was so angry that he almost went crazy. He was depressed, but there was nothing he could do about it. His fingernails pierced deeply into his flesh. Liang Miaozi laughed coldly. If kowtowing is useful, then what are the sect rules for? However, if I let you go back just like that, it would indeed be somewhat heartless. All of you can stay at the foot of the mountain for another half a year. Within half a year, my sect will ensure the safety of the three of you. As for this Ling Yun sect token, you can come to my sect to ask for pills, spiritual artifacts, and even secret martial books, spells, and spiritual techniques. However, it is impossible to let this dual meridian person enter my sect. If there's nothing else, then all of you. Yin Yang's brows furrowed once more and was about to change his words. Since he couldn't join the Ling Yun sect, then it was good for him to seek protection within the sect for a few more years. However, in the next moment, Liang Miaozi's tone changed. It was extremely cold. You can scram now. When his voice sounded out, it was like thunder. When he said those words, the wind surged. Yin Yang was the first to bear the brunt of the impact. His entire body was suddenly thrown back more than 100 feet, and he rolled down the stairs. When he fell to the ground, fresh blood spat out. Just a short sentence was enough to cause Yin Yang to be heavily injured. Chu Shui was also forced back hundreds of feet. However, her situation was slightly better than Yin Yang. Her face was ashen white. The vital energy in Zhongshu's body was also rumbling. He knew that it wasn't that Liang Miaozi showed mercy, but it was because of this person's lightning sound secret technique. The stronger one's internal energy was, the stronger the impact would be, which was why he, who had the weakest cultivation, was unharmed. However, the rage in his chest burned even brighter. It was like adding oil to the fire, burning him until he nearly lost all his rationality. His eyes were slightly red. Huang, he was also unaffected. His gaze towards the three of them was filled with pity. Although they were from the same sect, he felt that his senior master was a little too much. No matter what, the sect owed people who had the Ling Yun vermilion token. However, he couldn't interfere in this matter. He could only sigh. Senior Master Liang Yaozi is the head of the Hero East Hall and is in charge of all the disciples. Since he has made a decision, then he can't change it. How about I send all of you down the mountain? Zhong Shou was expressionless and didn't reply. He turned around and walked in front of Yin Yang and Chu Shui. The former wasn't someone who would be bullied by others. After he stood up, he didn't beg Liang Yaozi anymore. His face was green, his fists clenched tight. The rage in his eyes was nearly tangible. On the other hand, Chu Shui was even more furious. Her hand tightly gripped the sword hilt, and she bit her lips until they bled. Coincidentally, at this moment, in the direction of the palace gates, there was a mocking voice. With the Ling Yun vermilion token in hand, he was actually chased out. That should be the case. We are ashamed to be in the same team as such useless people. So what if his family background is good? Gantian Mountain Prince, I remember. Didn't that Gantian Mountain Monster King, Zhong, Wherein die 2 months ago? I have also heard of this Zhong Shou. I heard that he studied arts in our Linhai College for 3 years, but didn't achieve anything. A while ago, there were rumors that he was about to be chased out. How did he end up here? Although his voice was soft, in the ears of cultivators, even 1,000 feet away, they could hear it clearly. Chu Shui's face flushed red, pulling out the sword in her hand by 1/2 inch, a cold light shining. Huang Yi's face instantly sunk. 3 guests. I advise you not to make a mistake. After all, this is Ling Yun's sect's Pill Spirit Mountain. Yin Yang shook his head, pressing down on Chu Shui. Don't be rash. Let's go down the mountain first. Before he finished, Zhong Shou suddenly laughed out loud. In those 13 years of memories, he was indeed brought out by Yin Yang and Chu Shui. In truth, it was the same as being chased out of Linhai College. If it was the original Zhong Shou, he could only swallow his teeth and bear with it. However, if it was him, he probably wouldn't be able to change his temper. He would never be able to hide that bit of sharpness of his. The clamor of discussion outside the palace kept pouring into his ears. Liang Yaozi, who was on the steps, stood with his hands behind his back, looking down on the 3 of them like he was looking at ants. The rage in Zhong Shou's mind surprisingly disappeared. Instead, he laughed out loud. Uncle Yin, it isn't too late to go down the mountain later. Let's watch Zhong Shou take revenge for all of you. How about that? At this moment, his heart was as clear as a mirror, and his mind was as cold as ice. In his last life, he spent tens of years, but still couldn't reach that level. Now, he had actually leaped up. No wonder people said that no matter if one was a martial cultivator or spirit master, when one cultivated, one had to experience all the joys and sorrows of the world. Yin Yang was stunned, instinctively wanting to stop him. However, his expression suddenly changed. He suddenly felt that the teen in front of him gave off an unparalleled majesty. He was smiling, but the feeling he gave off was like an erupting volcano. His aura was suppressive, making him, an 8-body chakra mythic master, feel terrified and speechless. Following which, Zhong Shou directly turned around and walked towards the sky sword platform on the right. I heard that the Ling Yun sect ancestor used 18 puppets to lay out a small heaven sword formation on Pill Spirit Mountain. It was said that no one under the Ascended Realm could break it. Without using true Qi, anyone who can last 100 breaths can become a core disciple. 300 breaths can become a direct disciple. The person who destroys one of the puppets will directly become a disciple of the sect's sect master. Step by step, he climbed up the steps. Zhong Shou suddenly pulled out his sword and looked at the 18 wooden puppets in front of him. Didn't you say you want to test me? Zhong Shou isn't talented, but I want to test if this small heaven sword formation is worthy of its name. Chapter 23. Didn't you say you wanted to test it? Zhong Shou is not talented, but I want to test whether or not this small heaven sword formation is worthy of its name. When his words landed, the entire drill field suddenly became silent. Not only were Yin Yang and Chu Shui stunned, but the group of young cultivators in front of the palace were totally silent. Even Liang Miaozi was stunned. A short while later, a loud laugh spread out. A person rose into the air and landed on the sky sword platform. It was the old man, surnamed Lin, that Huang Yi called Senior Grandmaster. He smiled towards Zhong Shou. Kid, although you aren't big, your tone isn't small. Interesting. However, since you know the rules of my sect, you should also know that once you enter the sky sword platform, you won't be responsible for your life or death. Unless you don't use any true qi or spells, you won't be able to last 100 breaths. Zhong Shou nodded his head slightly, holding the pine-pattern wind sword in his hand. He didn't hesitate at all as he walked towards the center of the platform. No need to talk nonsense. I, Zhong Shou, naturally know the rules of your Lingyun sect. How could he not know? In his last life, since he knew about the Sky Sword and Heaven Talisman platforms, he had created a new character and came to challenge them every day. Other people avoided this stone platform like the plague. However, he treated this small Heaven Sword formation as well as that set of talismans as a sharpening stone to train his sword skills and talisman drawing techniques. Even now, he still remembered that it was a total of 2,372 times, 365 days and nights. When the minor heavenly cycle sword formation was finally broken through, his swordsmanship had also reached great success. In a short 3 years, the Sword Emperor Tanxiu had appeared out of nowhere in the God Emperor Manual. When the old man heard that, he wasn't angry, nodding his head. It's good that you know. Since the end of the Desolate Era, a total of 13,700 people from Donglin Cloud Continent came to challenge the small heaven sword formation. From Xuanwu ancestors to initial stage martial warriors, no one was able to win. The number of people who died on this platform was even close to 3,000. Recently, the number of people challenging this formation has been decreasing. I, Lin Fei, have only seen 3 people in these 400 years. Even though you have a dual meridian body and are unable to cultivate, you are still able to cultivate. However, to dare to step on this stage is already praiseworthy courage. Chu Shui, who was below the stage, was shocked and instinctively wanted to go forward. However, she was pulled back by Yin Yang. There's no need to worry. You've seen the Crown Prince's swordsmanship, Shui. It's extraordinary. It shouldn't be difficult to last for 100 breaths. Chu Shui felt a little relieved, but when she turned her head to look, she saw something. Yin Yang's expression was also incomparably solemn, his face filled with worry. Liang Miaozi, who was not far away, scoffed coldly, challenged the small heaven sword formation. You really don't know what death is. Before Lin Fei could finish his sentence, a look of impatience appeared on Zhong Shou's face. He smiled awkwardly and said no more. A talisman was shot out, turning into a dozen or so spiritual lights that penetrated into the bodies of those human-sized wooden puppets. The eyes of the 18 puppets instantly shone with a red light. Their entire bodies gave out cracking sounds, like an old machine that was being activated once more after hundreds and thousands of years. Zhong Shou coincidentally stepped into the center of the stage, his long sword pointing diagonally. The game company of the God Emperor game said that they had completely recreated this sword formation in the virtual world, and they were even better than the real one. However, the real small heaven sword formation was still a little different from the imitation in the game. After seeing so many advertisements from those unscrupulous merchants, he didn't find it surprising. Who knows whether or not he could take it? Those puppets moved for a moment until all the cracking sounds of their joints disappeared. Only then did they step forward in an orderly manner, giving out a loud explosion sound, following which they took several steps forward in unison. 18 bright swords, cold light shooting out in all directions. Zhong Shou smiled slightly, taking 3 steps to the left, only to see the 18 puppets change their positions. Each action, each step, They were all standard and precise to the extreme, not messy at all. Then, a total of 9 long swords came from all directions, stabbing straight at him. Even if he had seen numerous sword formations in his last life, Zhongsho still couldn't help but exclaim. As expected, there weren't any weaknesses that he could take advantage of. This sword formation was indeed exquisite. The 18 sword puppets looked out for one another, and their cooperation was exquisite to the pinnacle. If it was a living person using it, they might be able to use more power, but they definitely wouldn't be able to do it so seamlessly. However, this feeling was slightly different from the sword formation that he was familiar with. He didn't plan to take it head-on. Zhongsho stepped out once more, taking 2 steps to the right. He pretty much brushed against the sharp sword glows as he flashed out of this small circle, following which his body was like a butterfly flying through flowers, moving about within the sword formation. He was in a tight spot, but he was also really slippery. Chu Shui, who was below the platform, couldn't help but tightly grab onto her shirt. On the platform, Lin Fei, who seemed to have fallen asleep after activating the sword formation, opened his eyes once more and exclaimed. His footwork is not bad. He does have some foundations. After pondering for a while, more doubts appeared on his face. No matter how good his footwork was, it was impossible for him to advance and retreat as he wished within the sword formation. The small heaven sword formation wasn't unchangeable, unless this person's combat talent and intuition were terrifyingly strong, or his own sword path attainments were really deep. However, no matter which one it was for a 13-year-old kid, it was just too shocking. In front of the palace gate, there were originally sounds of laughter and chatter. However, at this moment, it slowly quietened down as they all looked towards the stone platform. They originally thought that the battle would end in just a few rounds. However, it still hadn't ended till now. The person that they had mocked was still standing on the platform. His extremely handsome face had a faint smile on it, which made one unconsciously feel intoxicated. Not bad. Speaking of which, this person isn't truly useless. His talent should be really good. What a waste. Or is it because his bloodline isn't pure? With dual meridians, no matter how good his talent is, it is useless. It has already been 48 breaths. If he dodged so easily, not to mention 100 breaths, even 400 breaths would be easily passed. However, there were some people who still had mocking expressions. Easily passed? Ling Yun's sex, small heaven sword formation isn't just for show. That year, my ancestor also challenged it. With his Xuanwu ancestor cultivation, he lost at 420 breaths. This person can advance and retreat as he pleases. That is the true killing move. It hasn't even begun. In the crowd, there was a 14-year-old teen whose eyes didn't shift away as he looked at the feet of Zhongsho on the platform. His eyes shone brightly, revealing a burning glow. Beside him was a girl of the same age, youthful and charming. At this moment, she suddenly turned around and smiled. Fei Bai, you have always called yourself a martial arts maniac, saying that you are one of a kind in Donglin Cloud Continent within the past 10 years. However, from what I see, this Zhongsho is a little stronger than you. Why don't we make a bet and guess how long he can last? I'm not betting. That teen decisively shook his head and looked at Zhongsho's right hand. I heard that 1,000 years ago, there was an ascended expert who attacked, but he could only fight to a draw with this sword formation. However, this person hasn't used his sword before, so I can't guess, and it's not easy to guess. That pine pattern wine sword actually didn't move from start to finish. In the eyes of the teen, this sword was like a poisonous snake hiding in the grass, extremely dangerous. It was okay if it didn't move, but if it did, it would be fatal. The young girl's eyes constricted, following which she shook her head. If you don't want to bet, then let's not bet. However, I'm guessing that Liang Miaozi is regretting it so much that his intestines are turning green. Although I can't see through this Zhongsho, I know that he is holding back a lot of his strength. 400 breaths isn't a problem. I heard that this person has a close relationship with Zhongsho's master and has helped him a lot in the dark. However, this time, our future senior brother's face won't look good. As she said that, the young girl started to gloat. Chapter 24. The teen known as Faye swept his eyes towards the first layer of the main hall. As expected, he saw Yang Yaozi's expression was really ugly, so dark that it seemed like water was about to drip out. He couldn't help but burst out laughing, following which his face turned serious. Liang Yaozi is after all our senior brother. How can you be so rude? The girl didn't care, her lips curling up as she focused on the sky sword platform. It is already the 95th breath. The teen's expression instantly turned solemn. 95th breath was the time when the small heaven sword formation changed. After that, it was time for the real killing sword. At this moment, pretty much everyone could notice the changes in the 18 puppets. The cold sword light suddenly became several times sharper. The speed of all the sword puppets also increased by at least 50%. A thick killing intent spread out on the sky sword platform. The sword light was continuous. Many sharp blade shadows caused the small and tall person on the platform to not be as calm as before. The sword shadows were like rain, like at any moment they could chop Zhong Shou into meat paste. However, Zhong Shou on the platform wasn't shocked. Instead, he laughed. It wasn't forced at all, but a truly happy laugh. After a full 95 breaths, he finally understood what was wrong. So the small heaven sword formation in the last life of the God Emperor was much stronger than the one on the sky sword platform of Pill Spirit Mountain. The God Emperor developer, who always loved to brag, actually spoke the truth. He was really dumb. How could the 18 puppets that operated on their own be stronger than a sword formation controlled by the AI? He originally thought that he needed to drag it out for 340 breaths before he had a chance to break the formation. Who knew that this chance would come so early? He took a step back to the right, stepping onto the koan position. The 3 sword puppets instantly charged forwards. Behind him, there were 4 streaks of sword light that swiftly pierced towards his back. Zhong Shou wasn't phased at all, moving further to the left. In such a dangerous situation, from the only gap, he brushed past the cold light and stepped 7 steps out. However, in front of his eyes were a full 14 sword shadows that pierced through the air. They were densely packed together, sealing off all of his escape routes. The 14 puppets seemed to have completely sealed off the space around him. At this moment, Zhong Shou could clearly hear the mockery from below the stone platform, mixed with a few sighs of regret. Lin Fei, who was observing the battle from the side, also sighed and closed his eyes again. 99 breaths, walking to your own death. Chu Shui's anxious exclamation also resounded in his ears. It could even be seen that Liang Yaozi, who had completely relaxed, had a cold and mocking smile on her face. Courting death? Zhong Shou laughed heartily. How could he not know that the flaw, just now, the position, was actually a trap? However, if he did not take the initiative to enter this trap, how could he break the formation? Such a pinnacle sword formation had to be put to death before it could be born. First, he took a deep breath, then Zhong Shou's body. The power that had been accumulated for a long time surged into his limbs like a nuclear explosion. Then his entire body suddenly charged forwards. The pine pattern wind sword that he had been holding in his hand since he stepped onto the sky sword platform flashed with a bright sword light. 4th basic sword technique, step straight stab. The lightning-like green sword shadow directly charged into the sword veil that had just spread out. It pierced in from the most unbelievable angle. With a dong, the sword in Zhong Shou's hand paused for a moment. Then, like a hot knife through butter, it pierced into the chest of the sword puppet. The huge strength directly smashed the embedded crystal talisman formation into pieces. It also caused the puppet to fly out of the sky sword platform. His body exploded, and countless fragments scattered in all directions. A giant hole suddenly appeared in the originally flawless sword veil. In an instant, the entire Dao Palace fell into a deathly silence. Everyone was stunned as they looked at this scene. The Lingyun sect disciples standing in front of the palace didn't have the heart to bother about the test anymore. They couldn't help but move closer to the sky sword platform. As for the teens, They were all in a mess. They wanted to directly stand on the platform to see it clearly. How is that possible? He actually broke it, so this weakness was hidden within the killing formation. I was wondering how in this world could there be a truly perfect sword formation? Lin Fei's eyes were wide open. His face didn't have any signs of sleepiness. It was as if there was a top beauty in front of him. His eyes didn't move at all. Liang Miaozi was originally prepared to wave his sleeves and leave. But at this moment his body suddenly stopped, his face filled with shock and disbelief. The small heaven sword formation that no one could break, and that even ascended experts was broken just like that. 99 breaths, and it fell to the hands of a teen who wasn't even 13? How was that possible? Yin Yang, whose body was as low as a leopard, was also so shocked that he couldn't move. He didn't hope that Zhong Shou would be able to wipe away his humiliation. How could the prestige of the top sect in the east of the cloud world be easily challenged? Even if he suffered such humiliation, he could only choose to swallow it. He originally thought that if Zhong Shou could last 100 breaths, he would at least be able to enter the inner sect of the Yunling sect. Just now, he was filled with despair and was even prepared to throw away his life to save Zhong Shou. Who knew that in the blink of an eye, such a miraculous turn of events would occur, making him unable to believe his eyes. At this moment, only Chu Shui was filled with joy without any other thoughts. 3 months ago, her young master was also like today, unbelievably killing several people, killing Zhongyu, using an unbelievable willow mark knife to take the right eye of burning Sword Wu Wei. On the platform, Zhong Shou was also slightly startled. Just as the sword in his hand stabbed into the heart of the puppet, he suddenly felt an ice-cold energy flow into his body from the tip of the sword. Before he could even react, it had already charged into his energy ocean. Luckily, although this ice-cold energy entered his body, it didn't cause him any discomfort. On the contrary, the stamina that he had used up was slightly recovered. At the same time, a thought flashed across his mind. Could it be that my guess is actually true? At this moment, he didn't dare to split his attention to check his body. Zhong Shou was startled for a moment before he retracted all his thoughts. His body charged out of the puppet sword formation due to the inertia. Lingyun Sect's small heaven sword formation had at least 3 people and at most 18. This battle still wasn't over. Breaking one puppet couldn't be considered breaking the formation. Every step he took, every strike he made, he needed to be extremely precise, and there couldn't be a single millimeter of difference. Moving diagonally to the left, his feet stepping on the ground, Zhong Shou's sword light flashed once more as it slashed behind him. Basic Sword Technique 17, Right Turning Sword. Second puppet, break. Another dong sound, the heavy and powerful sword light directly smashed the head of the puppet behind Zhong Shou, who didn't even have time to turn around, with one sword smashing it, which shrapnel flew everywhere. Zhong Shou's body flashed once more, using this sword puppet, which only had a body left and couldn't move, as a cover as he moved to the right and walked towards the Kim position. Basic Sword Technique 19, Lateral Charging Sword. Third puppet, break. The sharp and unparalleled sword light arrived in an instant, piercing through the neck of a sword puppet that came from the right. That strong force even caused the head of the wooden puppet to be totally broken. At this moment, the entire drill field was completely silent. Pretty much everyone, no matter young or old, had gathered below the platform. There were even more Lingyun's sect disciples who ran out from the depths of the palace. They didn't have the time to get closer to watch, so they could only watch from afar. That elegant figure wielded that ordinary pine ripple sword, and on the sky sword platform, he unleashed a series of breathtaking and cold sword lights. P.S. As for the update, I've been too busy recently. Along with the style of this book, which is a little different from the previous 3, I am adapting to it. As such, my writing speed is really slow and I don't have many drafts left. I really can't update too quickly, please understand. Also, there are people in the book review section who say that it doesn't make sense. I don't know if anyone noticed, but all of Liang Miaozi's actions didn't exceed his authority and responsibility. Even if he didn't let Zhong Shou enter the sect, he had his reasons. As for killing him after he entered the sect, he had to consider the situation of Gantian Mountain. The grievances between the main character and Ling Yun's sect weren't just in the game. It would take a lot of effort to explain, and I don't want to focus on the beginning as it might make everyone confused. Sorry. Apart from that, I would also like to thank the people who helped me. Good people won't be too frustrated. Lastly, the book review section management. I'm totally lazy. Recently, there were some errors in the management page, so I couldn't appoint a deputy moderator. I could only wait until I was in. I didn't need to spend a lot of time online, but it was best if I was online often and had patience. For example, this monarch's reigns distant clear clouds, and please treat me as a human would be of great help to the first clear. Chapter 25, which shavings flew about. Another sword puppet was smashed into pieces by Zhong Shou's sword light. As for the crowd below the sky sword platform, there was a buzz as they discussed animatedly. It was like all the shock that they had accumulated before had exploded out at this moment. There weren't many Ling Yun sect disciples who walked out of the palace, only 100 of them. However, their eyes were filled with shock, their expressions uncertain. Where did the person on the platform come from? Our sect's small heaven sword formation has only lasted for 400 breaths of time in the past 10,000 years. He broke it just like that? From start to finish, he was only using basic sword techniques. Is this the so-called returning to one's true self? Not only the sword technique, even his footwork is amazing. A 13-year-old kid who just started cultivating. How can he return to his true self? How can he return to his true self? However, this kid has trained this set of sword techniques to the point of perfection. What my sex teacher said was right. No matter how basic a martial technique is, if one grasps it to the extreme, one can have unfathomable abilities. Power. At the entrance of the palace, the two teen male and female were stupefied. When Zhong Shou stepped into the trap of the small heaven sword formation, even if they thought that their foresight was different, they still thought that this kid was asking to die. The outcome of this battle could be seen with just one look. In less than a breath's time, the young man on the stage had completely turned the situation around. At the most impossible moment, he broke the sword formation. This Zhong Shou can actually be so handsome. After being startled for a long while, when the teen girl came back to her senses, her face flushed red. I, Gahan Yun, have lived for 14 years, and this is the first time my heart has been moved by someone. If this fellow wasn't from the Zhong family, I might have planned to marry him. Fei Bai, he is really stronger than you. Although it is the basics of sword techniques, it is the essence of the sword path. The teen nodded his head slightly and didn't retort. His tone was filled with praise, not showing any signs of unwillingness. At least now, I'm not as good as him. However, within 10 years, the one and only talent in Donglin Cloud Continent will still be me and not him. Gohan Yin was slightly startled. Even if she saw someone of the same age use a sword to break the small heaven sword formation without any injuries, her childhood sweetheart didn't waver at all. His tone was terrifyingly confident, following which the teen girl smiled, thinking that if this Zhong Shou didn't have a dual meridian body and was like them, who knows what would happen in the future. That's right. As for the person opposite him, his current expression was most likely very interesting. Standing in front of the first hall, Liang Miaozi's face was already as pale as paper. Looking at that abnormally strong figure, his gaze was like an arrow, wishing that it could pierce through this young man. When the first puppet was destroyed, he was filled with regret. At this moment, he wanted to tear that person into pieces. How was that person? How was he an ant that was an ant that he could? Such exquisite sword techniques. In these 10,000 years, how many people at such an age could do that? His face turned slightly green and purple. Liang Miaozi could feel a few gazes filled with pity and gloating over his misfortune looking over from afar. The depths of his chest also felt a slight pain. The long sword slashed diagonally, slicing off the legs of the sword puppet. Then, like a spark from a flint, The sword turned back and pierced through the heart of another puppet where the beast crystal was placed. Zhongsho's footsteps flashed, carefully shifting away from his original position. At this moment, his feet were covered in various puppet parts. Not only did it stop these wooden puppets that didn't have much intelligence, but it also restricted his movement. His mouth was slightly panting. The meridians in his body were clashing like they were about to explode at any moment. Zhongsho's mental strength was even more exuberant. After the first sword strike, every time he killed a sword puppet, there would be an icy, cold, and fierce aura that would enter his body. Each time, it would allow his body to recover a little. As a result, his stamina was still unimaginably plentiful. He totally didn't expect that his stamina would be used up and that he would be extremely weak. It also allowed him to completely ignore everything else in his heart, and he was completely unable to hear the clamor below. All honor and disgrace, all calculations were tossed aside. In his eyes, there was only the sword in his hand and the puppets in front of him. Stepping on the koan position, just as the three puppets were about to surround him, Zhongsho took several steps back. Then he suddenly exerted strength, charging back at high speed. With just one sword, he pierced through the necks of two wooden puppets that couldn't react in time. The sword light slashed diagonally, slicing off these two weak necks. Then there was a ding as it clashed with the other sword beside him, causing numerous sparks to fly. The unstoppable sword energy caused Zhongsho to instantly take a step back. His feet stumbled and he nearly fell down. Be it in terms of strength or toughness, the wooden puppets were comparable to Xuanwu ancestors. Just one sword caused his blood to boil, and he couldn't take it. However, at this moment, the glow in Zhongsho's eyes didn't weaken at all. Instead, it became even brighter. Basic Sword Technique 44, External Spinning Sword. 18th Puppet Slay. The green pine pattern wind sword suddenly drew out a sword circle. A gentle force cleverly pushed the sword attack of the puppet to the side. Then, the green sword shadow was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue, suddenly stabbing and piercing through this sword puppet. When Zhongsho looked around once more, he saw that the platform was in a mess. Not a single puppet was able to raise its sword against him. The ground was covered in broken wood. The small heaven sword formation and the 18 sword puppets were all gone. After a short while, Zhongsho retreated from the battle in tense state, and his consciousness slowly cleared up. Following which, he saw Lin Fei on the platform, as well as numerous gazes below the sky sword platform, looking over. Disbelief, astonishment, and jealousy were all mixed together. Zhongsho was startled. In the next moment, he scoffed coldly. 343 breaths. This is the Lingyun sect's small heaven sword formation? It's just a few words caused the Lingyun sect disciples below to be slightly furious. However, a short moment later, they were silent once more. Breaking the formation within 100 breaths and 343 breaths to slay these 18 sword puppets, whose combat strength was already decent, one by one. Such a person did indeed have a right to say that it was just so. Apart from this extraordinarily handsome teen on the sky sword platform, no one else had the right to do so. In the hearts of many people, they even thought that the small heaven sword formation left by the Lingyun sect ancestor was to make things difficult for the heroes of the world. There was no one in the world who could break this formation without using internal energy. However, today, they personally witnessed the birth of such a miracle. Some of the people who knew the cause and effect all flushed red. They could only keep silent, unable to say anything to retort. Huang Yi, who was standing beside Liang Miaozi, sighed to himself. His senior master had gone overboard, humiliating them in such a manner. No wonder he would say such words. The pine pattern wind sword in Zhongsho's hand was already bent, and cracks appeared on the spine of the sword. He tossed it out, stabbing it into the center of the sky sword platform. Following which, his eyes looked towards the similarly sized stone platform on the left. Without much hesitation, he walked down from the sky sword platform and directly walked to the opposite side. When he walked, he didn't seem to have any overbearing aura. However, Those Ling Yun sect disciples and the many teens instinctively moved to the sides, opening up a path for Zhongsho to walk to the Heaven Talisman platform. Chapter 26. Heaven Talisman Platform. What is he going to do there? After the small Heaven Sword formation, does he still want to copy these 12 Heaven Talismans? The small Heaven Sword formation tests martial path talent. The 12 stone steels on the platform are all spirit master methods. Both the primordial spirit and talisman drawing required extreme talent to be able to copy. Neither could be missing. In these 10,000 years, under the day wandering realm, no one has been able to copy even one talisman. I heard my master say that he wants to copy the Heaven Talisman left by the ancestor. One needed to have an incomparably pure spirit, and, at the very least, one's calligraphy had to be at the level of divine power. Only then would it be possible. How can a spirit master before the day wandering realm be able to do that? 343 breaths to break the formation. This person's sword path is really terrifyingly strong. I don't believe that his talisman techniques are also so amazing. Looking on, as Zhongsho walked up step by step and stepped onto the stone platform on the left, the crowd started to discuss. Their gazes towards this teen were complicated. However, no one dared to say that he overestimated himself before the outcome was clear. Yin Yang and Chu Shui exchanged glances with one another. Zhongsho being able to break the small Heaven Sword formation already made them shocked and delighted. However, before the two of them came back to their senses, their prince had already stepped onto the Heaven Talisman platform. They had already seen Zhongsho's sword technique 3 months ago and had some confidence in their hearts. However, they didn't know what kind of standard his talisman path was, although he had studied in Linhai College for 3 years. In the end, Zhongsho was chased out of the college. Chu Shui suddenly had an idea and thought back to the materials that Zhongsho bought during these 3 months, all of which were needed by spirit masters. Also, during the battle with Zhongyu, the wind wall formation on the cloud stepping carriage was suddenly broken. Before this, she always thought that it was because her talisman technique wasn't good enough which caused the talisman formation to fail. Now that she thought about it, it might have been the work of her young master. However, on the 12 stone steels of the Heavenly Talisman platform were the 12 true Heavenly Talismans that Ancestor Ling Yun had written before he ascended. Even if his young master had broken the small Heaven Sword formation that no one could break, he still couldn't break it. She still had no confidence in Zhongsho. Just as the people below the stage were having mixed thoughts, Zhongsho stood in front of the first stone tablet. The monument was 30 feet tall. Apart from the front being flattened, there were no other decorations. It looked like it was made of stone, but it was actually the raw ore of Yongjin from the Yellow Spirit world. It was said that in this world, wherever there was murky gold, there would be evil spirits causing trouble. It was also one of the best materials for spirit masters to write talismans. If it weren't for this, it wouldn't have been able to bear this talisman and pass it down for millions and millions of years. The first rune on the 12 stone steels was Qian. In fact, every stroke and stroke was like a silver hook or tail of an eagle, like a soaring dragon. It was also like a wand returning to the dance of a phoenix, angrily smashing a stone. Vigorous and heavy, with a majestic aura, but also light and nimble. Be it the structure or the strokes, one couldn't tell that it was a Qian word. However, Zhongsho's consciousness knew that this was a true Qian word. Or rather, in the eyes of normal people, this thing that looked like a talisman should be the original appearance of this word. Who knows when, but that Lin Fei had arrived behind him. His eyes shone as he looked at Zhongsho. The rules here are the same as on the Sky Sword platform. You can't use any soul power or spiritual ability, and you can't borrow the help of spiritual treasures. In 10,000 years, there were a total of 46,044 people who copied the 12 god talismans. Half of them died from the backlash of the god talismans. We have to be careful. The old man's expression was also extremely complicated. Just from the words that this weak teen said, he knew that it was impossible. From this, One could tell that this kid had already given up on the idea of becoming a disciple. Breaking the small heaven sword formation was just a strike back at Ling Yun's sect. Glancing at Liang Miaozi, Lin Fei shook his head, thinking to himself that these few years, was he too indulgent of this hero, gathering hall head? However, today, no matter how much he blamed himself, it was of no use. Yet, such a world-shaking talent was rejected at the door. From today onwards, Ling Yun's sect was destined to be laughed at by others. If this child were to copy the 12 god talismans after breaking the minor heaven sword formation, he would be able to do so. There would probably be another storm within Pill Spirit Mountain. Everyone here, including the first seat, couldn't help but blame him. They couldn't help but have some thoughts that they shouldn't have. They only hoped that the god talismans drawn by the ancestor were, as the rumors said, that no one under the sun could draw them. It would be best if this kid in front of them died, just like that. However, the moment such a thought rose up, it made Lin Fei feel ashamed. Zhongshu didn't bother about Lin Fei's words. When he stood in front of the stone stele, his heart was clear, and all the chaotic thoughts were removed bit by bit. God Talisman, hand-drawn by a God Master. Any random thoughts that shouldn't have appeared were no different from asking to die. It was also an insult to the owner of the stone stele. Biting open his right index finger, he tapped on the starting point of the Heaven Talisman. Zhongshu instantly heard a loud explosion beside his ear. A strong intent charged into his mind. It was left by the person who drew the talisman. Even after 10,000 years, it still hadn't faded at all. It resonated with his soul and brought his consciousness into an incomparably vast world. It was a boundless sky that one could roam freely. Within it, there was water, wind, fire, and lightning. There was dust and sand, as well as all sorts of living beings that floated in the air. Samuraim's eyes shone. In his last life, he also took a year to draw these 12 god talismans. 365 days, he copied a total of 3,227 times. However, he had never experienced such an experience before. In just that instant, his understanding of this Qian symbol had already reached the limit. His index finger moved to the right, following the carvings, following which he felt numerous spiritual energy whirlpools being formed around him. Many external powers, either pulled or repelled, tried to force his finger to deviate to the side. Smiling slightly, Zhongshu didn't panic at all, either going with the flow, forcefully passing, or using the force to move. On this stone stele, he drew a crooked, ugly blood mark that looked like an earthworm. However, from start to finish, he didn't deviate from those carvings. Every stroke was really serious, without any hesitation at all. Only at the very bottom, at the last stroke, was it blocked by a strong power. At this moment, everyone below the Heaven Talisman platform all held their breaths. They knew that this copying had reached the most crucial moment. This stroke, success meant life, failure meant death. Lin Fei's eyes were glued to it, not daring to deviate for even a moment. To successfully copy the God Talisman, one had to understand the true meaning within. All the words in the world could describe the path of the world. All the talismans were the combination of the Tao. It could be said that one's back was extremely thin, without any signs of death. Could this teen known as Zhongshu, the Prince of Gantian Mountain, be able to do it? In the next moment, a smile appeared on Zhongshu's face. It was a smile that was filled with joy after comprehending the Tao, without any impurities. Lin Fei's pupils constricted to the size of needles at that moment. Heaven as the heavens as the clear, the supreme righteous yang as the heavens. A diagonal stroke. This stroke was still crooked, but it was invincible, totally breaking that unknown resistance. When the blood talisman was formed, a clear energy swept over from the heavens and earth. The spiritual energy in the area instantly rose by 100 times. Below the Heaven Talisman platform, there was a hissing sound, everyone sucking in a cold breath. Zhongshu only felt that his body was weightless. There was also a warm current flowing into his body, but it didn't charge towards his dantian, but into his soul ocean. He still didn't have a mood to bother. Zhongsho's eyes directly turned to the other side, to the second stone stele, the Kuan word god talisman. Kuan as the earth. The earth is turbid. The righteous Een has no roots. The earth is the earth. P.S. Comrades, please give me some recommendation tickets. It's just a matter of convenience, but it will be of great help in exploring new lands. Today I want to take a look at the new books list. Only then did I notice a bunch of gods. What a tragedy. The competition is really intense. Chapter 27. Beneath Pill Spirit Mountain, it was still raining heavily. Dark clouds pressed down, causing the entire Sudian mountain range to be as bright as night. Lightning flashed, occasionally lighting up the entire sky. Not far from the mountain gate of Pill Spirit Mountain, on a carriage, two people were looking at the peak of the mountain. An hour has passed. Why hasn't he come down yet? Uncle Xiao, did that person on the mountain really agree? Will there be any more changes? The person who spoke was a teen. His face was handsome, similar to Zhongsho. At this moment, his expression was filled with doubt. The person beside him was a 30-year-old middle-aged man, his face slightly yellow. After hearing that, he laughed. Young Master Zhongling doesn't need to worry. That senior Liang Yaozi is the Hero East Hall head and is close to young Master Zongshu's teacher. Since he agreed, he definitely has a 90% chance of stopping him. 19 Een Snow Lotus is enough for him to try his best. At this moment, if Zhongsho was here, he would be able to tell from a voice that this person was Feng Xiao, who spoke to Yin Yang a few months ago. Zhongling didn't relax just because of that. Instead, he frowned. Of course I know that. However, although my cousin can't cultivate the energy cultivation technique, he can't. Although my cousin can't cultivate, the few elders in the sect have said that without talking about his body, his cultivation talents are top-notch. That Ling Yun sect entrance test probably won't be a problem for him. Also, that Ling Yun vermilion token. Young Master Ling doesn't know how those large sects conduct themselves. Feng Xiao directly laughed coldly, his voice filled with disdain. The more large a sect like Pill Fountain sect is, the more despicable it is inside. So what if he passes the test? Just a dual meridian body is enough for that person on the mountain to have an excuse to reject him. Unless this kid is able to break through the minor sky sword formation on the sky sword terrace, or copy the 12 heavenly talismans left behind by the founding ancestor Ling Yun. Zhongling's expression froze, and then she laughed and shook her head. No one can break the small heaven sword formation. As for the 12 heavenly talismans, no one under the day, wandering realm has been able to successfully copy them. Not to mention him, even those geniuses that were accepted into the Soaring Cloud sect today were absolutely unable to do so. There's no need to even mention my cousin. It's just that today is the first task that Brother Zhongling has entrusted to me. Zhongling really doesn't want anything to go wrong. As she spoke, Zhongling raised her head again and looked at the mountainside. She murmured, "In the past, when my uncle was still around, my cousin was always high and mighty, and I had to look up to him. All these years, I've been thinking this Zhongsho is just a bastard, a cripple who can't cultivate. What right does he have to be above me? Being able to pull him down from the clouds, drag him into the mud, and ruthlessly stomp on him a few times can be considered as resolving a knot in my heart." Feng Xiao couldn't help but feel awkward and wanted to go along with him. However, he was once the subordinate of the previous Demon King. It was inappropriate for him to say such words and would make others look down on him. After hesitating for a while, he finally shook his head. Crown Prince Zhongsho, regardless of talent or virtue, is not qualified for the throne. He really doesn't know his own limitations. You can't blame others for what happened today. Following Zhongling's line of sight, Feng Zhao's face was also filled with surprise. He had no idea what had happened up there. It had indeed dragged on for a long time. The palace halfway up the mountain was already empty. All the inner and outer sect disciples, including the apprentices, had gathered below the heavenly talisman platform. Most people's expressions were uncertain. Some were shocked, some were disbelieving, some were angry, and some were envious. However, without exception, Their gazes were fixed on the figure on the stone, not daring to leave it for even a moment. It's already the ninth talisman, the Earth Talisman. The remaining God Talismans probably won't be able to stop him. 12 heavenly talismans, Qian Kun, Yin Yang, metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, and luck. Among them, the 4 characters, Qian Kun, Yin Yang, are the most difficult to draw. Instead of starting with the easiest part, he chose the most difficult Qian Kun talisman. Naturally, he would be unstoppable later on. I really didn't think that there would actually be someone in this world who could copy these heavenly talismans without using any soul remembrance. I'm really ashamed. It's still too early to speak. Although the words universe and earth were the most difficult, the final word, luck, was even better. The true meaning of this talisman is unfathomable. This person was able to draw the first 11 talismans, but he might not be able to draw the luck talisman. Within the crowd, Go Hanyun's icy eyes flashed as she stared fixedly at Zhong Shou on the stage. She also sighed. Of the 12 heavenly talismans, 9 have been copied. Fei Bai, what do you think I should do? The more I look at this Zhong Shou, the more I like him. I can't let him go. The face of the teen beside her twitched. However, he instantly calmed down. Before this, I really underestimated him. His sword path is amazing and his talisman techniques are top-notch. Hanyun, how many of these 12 heavenly talismans do you have confidence in copying? Including the 2 words universe, a total of 11. Go Hanyun raised her chin, her face filled with pride. Following which, she looked at the last stone stele with a dejected expression. Only this stele was different in color from the other ones. It was silver in color and shone brightly. The material was also changed to light cloud stone. It wasn't as precious as gold, but it had its own special characteristics. Only this luck word can't be drawn. The so-called luck path is too difficult to grasp. If not for this talisman, I would really doubt whether or not such laws exist in this world. For me to grasp it, I need 2 more years. It was said that above luck, there is a so-called fate, which is even more indiscernible. Speaking of which, our ancestors' achievements were just SOSO. He only left behind these 12 heavenly talismans, the more profound universe word. He didn't even touch the border. The moment she talked about the talisman path, this teen was really interested, rambling on, unable to stop. The teen was already satisfied with the answer from before, directly changing the topic. I guess that to break this small heaven sword formation, I would also need 2 more years. So Hanyun is the same as me. However, these talismans are really ugly. The blood talismans that Zhong Shou wrote on the stone stele, even if they were called crawling bugs, it would be an overstatement. Looking closely, they were pretty much many ugly and twisted vines, unbearable to look at. You're just a martial artist? What do you know? Gahanyan scoffed coldly. Then, she looked at the blood talismans like she was looking at a top calligraphy piece. Without using any spiritual energy, no matter how skilled the person who drew it is, it would be hard for it to not deviate. These talismans might be ugly, but they contain the heaven talisman path, lacking in what they should have and lacking in what they shouldn't have. This person's grasp of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth has reached the extreme. I don't know what the situation is like in the Central Cloud Continent, but in Donglin Cloud Continent, there are no more than 5 people of the same age who can compare to him. Her voice paused as her gaze turned towards Zhong Shou, who was on the stage, filled with confidence. I have decided, if he can copy the last talisman, then I will chase him. Even if I, Go Hanyun, have to chase after him, I will get him. The teen burst out laughing, following which he quickly stopped himself. He didn't have any intention to object, his face solemn as he continued to look at the stage. At this moment, Zhong Shou was already standing in front of the lightning word stele, using his index finger, which was dripping blood, to touch the starting point of the heavenly talisman. The teen didn't care at all. The difficulty of copying the lightning word was only lower than yin and yang. However, since the latter 4 words were already drawn, then this lightning word shouldn't be too difficult for this person. He was only a little curious in his heart whether or not this person could copy the hardest luck word that Gohanyan mentioned. Chapter 28. Wind is the wind. Wind is the movement of energy. Cold and heat go against each other. The wind is endless. There is no hole it can't enter. Shock is the thunder. Thunder is the loud sound. The vibration of the sound is loud, so it can be heard from 100 miles away. The east is wood. Wood has yin and yang. The combination is shock. His index finger neatly drew the last line of blood on the stone tablet. On the Heaven Talisman platform, loud and soft sounds could be heard. The melody was weird, sometimes clearing one's mind and sometimes causing one to be shocked. Zhongsho sucked on the wound on his finger, feeling helpless in his heart as he waited for the thunder sounds to dissipate. Even if he didn't use any spiritual energy or spiritual sense, when these talismans that contained the path of nature were drawn out, they would naturally have a certain amount of natural strength. The lightning talisman was formed. The next one was the luck talisman. Zhongsho's brows couldn't help but frown. Out of the 12 god talismans, the one he had the least confidence in was this last one. Luck and fortune were the most indiscernible and hard to predict. From small ants and dust to big families and countries, they all had their own luck. In his last life, he wasn't able to grasp the true meaning of the path. The reason why he was able to successfully copy it was because he had practiced numerous times. He used the dumbest method to grasp this talisman. He still used his index finger to touch the starting point of the talisman. Everyone in the drill ground held their breaths for a while. In just a moment, Zhongsho's soul started to resonate with this talisman. Then his consciousness was forcefully pulled out once more. However, this time he wasn't pulled by the stone steel to look at the various natural phenomena of heaven and earth. Instead, it was a dream that seemed real. It caused his consciousness to be totally immersed in it. Who knows how long had passed, but when Zhongsho came back to his senses, 2 streams of tears flowed out from his eyes. Suddenly, Zhongsho felt like he had experienced the life of an old man. The rise and fall of a country, the rise and fall of a person's life in just a few decades. So the true meaning of the luck word is so simple. Laughing involuntarily, Zhongsho couldn't say what he was feeling at this moment. All of a sudden, his hostility towards the cloud-soaring sect was reduced by quite a bit. He didn't know why the Lingyun founder had set up the small Heaven Sword formation and the 12 Sky Manor Divine Steels. But today, Zhongsho had more or less received some benefits from this ancient powerhouse. 11 heavenly talismans, 11 types of illusions. Even though he had long since grasped the true meaning of talismans within them, it wasn't without benefits. As for the luck word, what he had comprehended was only the most basic of talisman intents. However, it would allow him to truly step into the most mysterious and unpredictable door of the great Tao that contains supreme abilities. Misfortune is a blessing in disguise, and a blessing in disguise. Who knows? There is no righteousness in it. Righteousness becomes wonder. Kindness becomes a demon. The mysteries of man will last a long time. To know one's masculinity and guard one's femininity is the world stream. To know one's glory and guard one's disgrace is the world valley. To know one's white and guard one's black is the world style. There is no door to misfortune and fortune. Only man can summon it. Good and evil retribution follows like a shadow. The heavenly Tao naturally existed. The so-called luck was also within the heavenly Tao. However, due to the changing environment of the universe, one couldn't predict it. Man had been confused by the misfortune and fortune of fate for a long time. The reason why the misfortune and fortune of fate depended on one another was like how the good and evil of human nature changed, which was why. The root of misfortune lies in the evil of the body, the evil of the mind. The root of fortune lies in cultivating virtue and doing good deeds. However, was the true meaning of this luck word really so simple? Zhongsho laughed coldly, thinking to himself that if he entered the Founder's Gate, he wouldn't be able to grasp the path of luck in his life. If everyone in this world did good deeds, then wouldn't there be no more misfortune in this world? However, there was no need for him to think too deeply about it. He was just a small spirit master who had just calmed down. It would be tough for him to even protect his life, so why would he need to think about the true meaning of the Great Tao? He also didn't have the right to search for it. He could only follow what the Lingyun founder wanted to write. Blood flowed along those marks and continued to spread out. In the last life, he had copied the luck word talisman close to 1,000 times. In this life, he had comprehended the true meaning of this talisman. It caused each stroke of Zhongshou to be filled with strength, nimble and elegant, totally natural. It didn't have any of the ugly feeling from before. When the final stroke of the painting was completed, Chu Feng's expression changed. There were no other changes on the Heaven Talisman platform. Only the stone steel made of the light cloud stone suddenly cracked open and exploded into pieces. The entire drill field was instantly deathly silent. Liang Miaozi's face was ashen white like paper. Lin Fei's expression was really solemn. Gu Hanyun, who was below the stone platform, was in a daze as she muttered to herself in an extremely soft voice. He actually drew it out. It is obviously impossible. Father said that under the day wandering realm, one wouldn't be able to touch the path of luck. Not to mention day wandering. Even if one formed a true image, one wouldn't have such ability. We are all ants under the great Tao. So how can we touch the true mysteries of the heavenly Tao? Also, this fellow's talisman brush technique actually improved. I am so envious. Damn it, the luck word steel is broken. Where am I going to learn this talisman intent? Do I have to go to the other 4 cloud continents, or that cloud palace of Lingyun's sect? The team beside her raised his brows when he heard that. A weird expression flashed across his face as he shook his head. He still didn't understand what Gahanya meant. However, he knew that the Gantia Mountain Prince on the platform seemed to have done something amazing. Zhongshou's final stroke lasted for half a breath. The moment this stone talisman tablet shattered, a warm current also entered his body from his fingertips and directly into his primordial spirit. However, the amount this time was nearly 10 times greater than the amount of talisman tablets that had flowed in from the previous 11. Zhongshou finally sensed what this warm current was. It is actually a talisman. Is it the Heaven Talisman spiritual seed? If that's the case, then the cold energy within the 18 sword puppets should be as I expected. With a slight thought, Zhongshou came back to his senses, looking at the broken stone all over the ground, as well as the silent people below the platform. Instantly, he felt his chest relax, all the depression disappearing. Great! Laughing softly, Zhongshou's brows rose up, revealing a joyous expression. He had long wanted to viciously suppress the arrogance of this Lingyun sect. In a last life, although he killed numerous Lingyun sect disciples in the virtual world, he was still unable to harm their foundations. Who knew that in this life, after reincarnating 10,000 years ago, he would be able to fulfill his wish? This is the small heaven sword formation that is said to be unbreakable, the 12 god talismans that no one can copy. The 30,000 Lingyun sect disciples can't even compare to a piece of trash like me. Ha! Laughing coldly, Zhongshou's words stopped, thinking back to the gift from the Lingyun ancestor in his body. In the end, he couldn't say anything more unpleasant. Lin Fei's expression changed slightly. A moment later, he regained his calmness. In the past, the ancestor said that these 18 sword puppets and the 12 god talisman steels, those who can succeed in one can become the direct disciple of the sect leader. Those who can succeed in both can enter the ancestor hall to cultivate for 3 years 10 years later. What does the prince think? The gazes below the stage instantly turned serious. They were all silent as they waited for Zhongshou to make his choice. They knew that this thin and weak teen just needed to say one word, and he would be above everyone here. As for the 3 words, Ancestral Hall, it was even more enviable. Liang Miaozi in the distance clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles cracking, his expression uncertain. In this world, there were actually people with top talents in the martial path and spiritual cultivation. However, Such a shocking talent had actually appeared in this child's body. Zhong Shou's heart shook, his mind actually hesitating. Cultivate for 3 years in the Lingyun sect Ancestor Hall? There was actually such a good thing? The Lingyun sect Ancestor Hall was one of the 10 shrines of the Cloud World. Although it was ranked last, it still contained the essence of the martial Tao and soul Tao of the various generations of geniuses in the cloud-soaring sect over the past 10,000 years. Countless people flocked to it. The 12 god talismans here, the small heaven sword formation, although they weren't ordinary, compared to the martial arts and spiritual cultivation shrines, they were the most basic methods. Swallowing his saliva, Zhong Shou was drooling. However, in the next moment, his gaze landed on Yin Yang and Chu Shui. He instantly mocked himself. Ancestor Hall? I'm really tempted. However, Zhong Shou, don't have such thick skin. Today, since I was scolded as trash, I don't have to enter the Lingyun sect. Anyways, my dual meridian body isn't good enough for you, right? Chapter 29. Ancestral Hall? I'm a little tempted. However, Zhong Shou, don't have such thick skin. Since I was scolded as trash, I don't have to join the Yunling sect. Anyways, my dual meridian body isn't good enough for you, right? After he said that, Zhong Shou suddenly jumped off the Heaven Talisman platform and directly walked towards the entrance of the palace. Lin Fei opened his mouth and wanted to ask him to stay, but in the end, he sighed and didn't say a word. From start to finish, Liang Miaozi, who was standing in front of the main hall, had drops of fresh blood dripping from his fists. Yin Yang hesitated slightly, a struggling expression appearing on his face. However, in just a short while, his expression was resolute as he chased up with Chu Shui. Just as they walked out of the crowd, Zhong Shou suddenly thought about something, turning his head and saying, Uncle Lin, why are you still holding on to that Lingyun sect token? Don't tell me you can eat this kind of useless thing? Yin Yang was startled before he broke out into a laugh. He casually tossed the Lingyun sect token in his hand to the side. Along with a crisp, quang dang sound, the faces of the hundreds of Lingyun sect disciples in the drill field flushed red. They felt both annoyed and ashamed. Throwing this token on the ground was tantamount to a heavy slap to their faces. The 10,000 years of reputation and sect rules of the Lingyun sect seemed to have been heavily trampled on the ground by someone. On the talent platform, Lin Fei's expression became more and more dejected. As for Liang Miaozi, he only felt an intense pain in his chest and a sweet taste in his throat. His mouth was filled with the taste of rust. Zhong Shou laughed out loud and continued to walk out. Just as he was about to step out of the door, he suddenly saw a person blocking the entrance. He was tall and thin, his face young and tender, his skin slightly tanned. His aura was like the sun, making one instinctively have a good impression of him. Only his gaze was like that of a wild beast, fierce and overbearing. An extremely domineering and powerful aura rushed over at this moment, shaking one's mind. It was like in front of him was a huge leopard that was about to choose a person to eat and not a teen who was the same age as him, around 13 years old. Yin Yang's expression instantly changed slightly. He hurriedly stepped forward, trying to block in front of Zhong Shou. At this moment, Zhong Shou's eyes squinted. So, is this person, the memories buried in the depths of his mind instantly came alive. Yin Fei Bai had entered the cloud-soaring sect at the age of 13. 10 years later, he had stepped into the ranks of heaven rank experts. Calculating the time and age, didn't this person enter the Lingyun sect around this year? Lingyun sect's disciples this year, apart from this person. Who else was capable of grasping the force of the martial Tao at such an age? Since this person was here, then the other person must also be here. His eyes, as expected, not far away, he found a girl's figure. Her face flushed red as she looked on with interest. If he guessed correctly, this girl's surname was Gu and her name was Hanyan. During the God Emperor era, spiritual energy surged. Countless heroes appeared out of nowhere. Although the two of them would become top geniuses in the future, they were not too outstanding when placed among the many experts. The reason why Zhongsho remembered them was because in his last life, he had an intense battle with the two pill spirit walls. Next was the Heaven Talisman and the Sky Sword platform. Even without him today, in just 2 years, this Yin Fei Bai would be able to break the legend of Donglin Cloud Continent. Just one knife, and in 700 breaths, he broke the small Heaven Sword formation. As for Gohan Yun, she borrowed the Luo Shao Spirit Gathering Brush and personally drew 12 talismans on the Heaven Talisman platform, shocking the Cloud Continent. On the same day, the two of them became direct disciples of the Lingyun sect and became the pillars of the sect. His heart shook slightly before calming down once more. Zhongsho's body didn't stop at all as he continued to walk forwards. However, the position where his feet landed slightly changed. Just by shifting his body to the side, he easily caused this fierce leopard-like aura to collapse. He brushed past the body of this teen. Yin Fei Bai's body instantly shook, following which he scoffed coldly. What an exquisite method! It was really a pity that he had such talent in martial arts. You have dual meridians, so I won with an unfair advantage. If in 3 years you have a chance to enter the martial master realm, Fei Bai will definitely find you to fight. Zhongsho was confused. He didn't know the reason behind those words and couldn't understand the cause and effect within. Now that he won with an unfair advantage, then 3 years later he would be at ease? Following which he remembered the martial arts, maniac personality of this person and immediately shook his head. He didn't bother with this person and directly walked out of the palace gates, only to see that although there were many mountains on both sides, clouds wrapped around them. Looking out from the front, it was a vast expanse. Tens of miles of land were all in one's field of vision. It made one's heart open up and feel relaxed. However, when Zhongsho looked down once more, he saw a craggy and steep mountain path that led to the foot of the mountain. It was also made of jade, but it was extremely dangerous. There were also numerous clouds which covered the path, such that one couldn't see where it went. It was like it was foreshadowing his future path. Taking a deep breath, Zhongsho laughed out loud once more as he walked down the mountain. Maybe because he used up too much stamina, Zhongsho's footsteps were weak and his body was shaky. However, each step he took was extremely firm. No matter how tough this path was, he would still be able to walk through it. If there was no path in front, then at most he would forcefully open one. There was no reason why his tens of years of accumulation in his last life couldn't overcome this dual meridian body. Although this Lingyun sect was good, his personality preferred to be free and unrestrained. His chest was filled with pride, and he felt good about himself. He only felt that all the obstacles in the world were so simple. Zhongsho suddenly cried out. His legs went soft, and his entire body couldn't help but fall forward. Looking at the empty, bottomless abyss, Zhongsho helplessly covered his face with his hands, thinking to himself that his life was over. He was thinking to himself that he wasn't able to fulfill his ambitions, and was he going to die here? In the next moment, he felt the sky and earth spinning. He was forcefully pulled back by someone. "Young master, don't force yourself." The voice was like a silver bell. When Zhongsho looked carefully, he was already on Chu Shue's back. Preposterous. He was a man. How could he be carried by a girl? Zhongsho instinctively wanted to struggle, but when Chu Shue's tempting body scent entered his nose, he immediately changed his mind. He immediately changed his mind and hugged the girl tightly while giggling. This smell was really nice. Until 2 hours after Zhongsho and the other two left, the Pill Spirit Palace was still totally silent. The Inner Sect Disciple entrance test also ended in a hurry. All the Lingyun sect disciples had dark and sunken expressions. No one wanted to clean up the broken parts and stones on the 2 stone platforms. No one wanted to touch the Lingyun vermilion token. Lin Fei and Liang Miaozi, who had the highest status here, were like statues standing on the spot in a daze for a long time. Coincidentally, at that moment, a 3-colored glow descended from the cloud layer of the mountain peak. A figure appeared on the Heaven Talisman platform. A middle-aged man around 40 with a tall hat and wide belt stepped out from the light. Looking around, The warm smile that should have hung on his face all year long was gone. All that was left was shock. Senior Master Lin, did something happen? Ling Weizi only made a trip to the Yuling Palace. Did he miss something? Looking at the situation, did someone break the small heaven sword formation and copy the 12 heaven talismans? I wonder which disciple has such a heaven-sent talent. Lin Fei's body froze, an unspeakable bitterness in his mouth. Chapter 30. The atmosphere on the Heaven Talisman platform was terrifyingly cold. The few Pill Spirit Palace managers were all nervous, standing solemnly as they looked at Ling Weizi, whose face was dark and uncertain. Which means that the Gantian Mountain Prince used the Lingyun Vermilion token and wanted to join our sect, but was stopped by junior brother Liang Yaozi. Not only did he chase him away, but he also humiliated him. Then, in his rage, not only did he break the small heaven sword formation, but he also successfully copied the 12 god talismans. As he said that, Ling Weizi felt an intense pain in his head. He could imagine what the situation was like. Top martial talent, top talisman talents of the same generation. Such a teen, even without today's matter, was enough to shock the hearts of people. Then, this Gantian Mountain Prince didn't choose to join the Lingyun sect. Not only did he humiliate our sect, but he also threw away our Lingyun Vermilion token like it was a broken broom. The people beside him didn't reply, their faces filled with shame. Ling Weizi only felt that his chest was stuffy and his head was dizzy. He took in a few deep breaths to resist the urge to beat up the few people on the platform. However, when he looked at the puppet parts and broken stones on the ground, his face couldn't help but twitch. He casually took the red token into his hand and gently touched it. After a while, the anger in Ling Weizi's eyes slowly faded. However, the chilling aura emitted from his body caused people's hearts to palpitate. Gantian Mountain Prince, I remember that kid isn't even 13, right? Huh, how great. A 13-year-old genius who could break the small heaven sword formation and copy the 12 god talismans was chased away by us just like that. If this matter spreads out, who knows what the people of the three factions will say about us? Do you have eyes but fail to see, or are you a blind idiot? Forget about that. Not being able to recruit such a top genius into our sect is regretful, but it doesn't harm the foundations of our sect. However, this Lingyun Vermilion token affects the 10,000 years of reputation of our sect. I, Ling Weizi, am ashamed. I don't know how to meet those few ancestors after I die. The surrounding Taoists felt even more ashamed. Ling Weizi's cold gaze also swept towards Liang Yaozi. Junior brother Liang Yaozi, today's matter is all because of you. I wonder how junior brother is going to explain this. Liang Yaozi was totally devoid of life. After a slight hesitation, he still opened his mouth to argue. I think this kid has a dual meridian body and is not suitable for cultivation. Within the sect, although there are dual meridian cultivation methods, they aren't up to standard. That's an excuse. There are so many precedents in the sect, but they didn't cause any harm to our sect. That Zhong Weiran just wanted to protect his son. Our sect owes this person a debt of gratitude. Why can't we protect his descendants? Ling Weizi shook his head, his face filled with disappointment. Moreover, since the Gantian Mountain Prince has such talent, even if he is a dual meridian body, my sect will go all out to make up for it. Junior Martial Brother, I know that you've had some dealings with that person over the years. Is this friendship strong enough for you to harm the interests of the sect for him? I think you've already forgotten your own identity these past few years. You've been spoiled too much by that person. Although his words were soft, Liang Miaozi's body shook once more. He was totally dejected. A moment later, he barely moved his lips. I know I'm wrong. Today I'll go into secluded meditation and wait for the sect to punish me. Ling Weizi didn't bother about him, turning around and looking at Lin Fei. The latter's face was bitter as he said, I'm also in the wrong for this matter. Junior Martial Brother, in the future, I will go and receive my punishment. When Ling Weizi heard that, he laughed bitterly. I don't know what to do about today's matter. I can only try my best to clean up the mess. Only, How many people personally witnessed what happened just now? A total of 269 people. As the spiritual wave is about to arrive, close to 90% of the senior Marshall brothers have entered the cave to cultivate. Only the disciples on duty and the junior Marshall brothers and sisters who entered today were present. Huang Yi seemed to know that Ling Weizi would ask such a question, answering without hesitation. Ling Weizi's eyes lit up. 269 people? Luckily, there aren't many. Muttering softly, Ling Weizi sighed as he looked into the sky. I'll report this matter to the sect leader. Let's hope that this matter can be salvaged. No matter what, we can't let such a shocking talent fall outside of our Lingyun sect. At this moment, Zhongshou and the other two were walking at the foot of the mountain. The Pill Spirit Mountain was 20,000 feet high, and the path was extremely dangerous. Even Chu Shui and Yin Yang both had decent strength and were good at flying. They spent close to 4 hours to reach the foot of the mountain. Zhongshou more or less regretted that he had too much backbone when he left. Actually, he should have asked Huang Yi to send him down first. Yin Yang was silent along the way. Only when he looked down at the giant mountain gate did he suddenly open his mouth. Prince, you really don't want to enter the Lingyun sect. Once you walk out of this Pill Spirit Mountain, there will be no room for regret. Along the way, it will be filled with killing intent and indiscernible dangers. That Liang Miaozi is just a despicable person. Why care about such a small humiliation? How can I not care? I've already said those words. Do I have to walk back and let them laugh at me? As a person, one must have pride. Zhongshou shook his head and laughed, his expression expressionless. Actually, I don't care about face. However, seeing the two of you being humiliated by that fellow, I really can't take it anymore. Those despicable people are really disgusting. Yin Yang was stunned and speechless. Although the prince's words were bold and handsome, why did his tone sound a little weak? Actually, those small humiliation didn't matter to him and Chu Shui. Even if they went back now, how would the people of the Lingyun sect laugh at them? They would treat them like VIPs. Just as he wanted to say a few words to give Zhongshou a way out, Zhongshou's expression changed. Chu Shui didn't feel anything, scoffing coldly. I think that young master is right. Especially that Liang Miaozi, he is so annoying. He said that young master is trash. However, apart from having a dual meridian body, which part of young master isn't better than him? Is the top sect in the east of the cloud world so amazing? In the future, even if they beg us, we won't go back. Even if Shui dies, she isn't willing to enter this Lingyun sect. Zhongshou and Yin Yang all opened their mouths, speechless. The latter thought about it and felt that it wasn't appropriate to turn back now. He changed the topic and asked, how did the prince notice the weakness of the small heaven? Yin Yang thought about it for a long time and felt that the entire sword formation had no weaknesses to be found. It was really well coordinated. It is really hard to imagine that the prince would be able to find a way to break the formation so quickly. That is simple. When Zhongshou heard that, he laughed out loud. If there are no weaknesses, then I will make one myself. Yin Yang's brows instantly furrowed. That was the logic of martial arts. However, if these 18 sword puppets could be broken so easily, then it shouldn't be that simple. After 10,000 years, no one in the Donglin cloud world was able to break it. In the next moment, he heard Zhongshou's voice ring out once more. Those sword puppets are indeed made impenetrable by them. When they are slow, naturally there's nothing they can do. However, when they are quick, there will be a chance. Yin Yang's body shuddered slightly. A bright glow flashed in his eyes as he understood. When they were slow, they were impenetrable. However, once they were quick, there would be a chance. So that was the case. However, did the prince think of it himself, or did he rely on his intuition to deduce? If it was the latter, then his prince would definitely be a rare martial arts talent. In the future, he would be the top of the generation. If it was the former, then it would be even more terrifying and terrifying. Chapter 31. On the stone steps down the mountain, Yin Yang was silent once more. Walking at the back, looking at Zhongshou's back view, he was slightly distracted. This kid's talent was 1 in a million. Unfortunately, his wings were tied up. If he could break free from the dual meridians, he would be able to soar into the clouds. Even the sky of the cloud world might not be able to accommodate such an eagle that was born high up. However, to solve such a body type, to truly break free, was easier said than done. Just as Yin Yang was in a daze, Zhongshou and Shui started to quarrel. Not far from the mountain gate, Zhongshou was prepared to get down and walk by himself. Shui wouldn't let him, her jade-like arms wrapped tightly around his back, not letting him get down. Zhongshou struggled for half a day, but was unable to break free. He could only knock Chu Shui's head in annoyance. Little brat Shui, why aren't you putting me down? If other people see, how will your young master face others? He had no choice on the mountain. The small heaven sword formation and the 12 god talismans had used up all his strength. The mountain path was also tough to traverse, each step filled with danger. However, if he was carried by a girl out of the mountain, it would be a little inappropriate. I won't let go. Shui also snorted coldly in a self-righteous manner, pouting as she complained, Don't move. We're just a few steps away. Young master, you have been like this since you were young. You like to flaunt your strength. Just now you had cramps tens of times. Now you have no strength, right? You still have to hold on. Also, don't call me little brat. Shui has already grown up. Zhong Shaxin couldn't help but feel awkward. After breaking those 18 sword puppets, he didn't feel much on a mountain, but the moment he went down, each of his muscles was spasming. However, he wasn't willing to admit defeat. Who said I have no strength? Cramps are cramps. It has nothing to do with being exhausted. You're only 13. If you aren't a little brat, then what are you? Don't you feel tired after carrying me for so long? I'm not tired. Shui was very strong. She could walk for a few days without any problems. Oomph. Young master, you're lying again. When I was struggling just now, I was really weak. Shui didn't even take it seriously. Before she could finish, Zhongshou flew into a rage out of humiliation. Damn girl. Your young master has a dual meridian body, and there will be more situations like this in the future. Do you think he will let you carry him every single time? Chu Shui raised her eyebrows proudly, her expression extremely serious. Of course, if young master wants to be like this for the rest of his life, Shui will carry young master for the rest of his life. Shui promised Jun Shang that she would never leave young master in this lifetime. Zhongshou was angry and amused at the same time, but at this moment, he was slightly moved. He felt that the softest part of his heart was suddenly bumped, and the emotions in his chest were extremely complicated. His eyes unconsciously softened as he focused on Chu Shui. All of a sudden, he forgot to continue struggling. Only after they passed the mountain gates did he slowly come back to his senses. Just as he was about to reignite the flames of war, he saw two people walking over from afar. Chu Shui and Yin Yang's bodies instantly stopped. Zhongshou's expression also turned serious. Out of these two people, one was around 40, he looked unfamiliar and had never seen him before. The other was only 16, but he felt a little familiar. In his mind, he automatically flipped through some memories regarding this person. Zhongling, Zhongshu's blood brother, and also one of his cousins. In Zhongshou's memory, he didn't have much interaction with this person. When they met, they would just nod their heads. Their relationship was really cold. Within Gantia Mountain, they didn't speak a single word for a full few years. Although he didn't know why this person would appear here. Anyways, he most probably had bad intentions towards him. The two people on the other side also paused a little stunned, following which their expressions relaxed. Zhongling was the first to open his mouth, saying coldly, Isn't this cousin? Looking at the situation, was Brother Shou chased down by Lingyun's sect? I heard that uncle has a Lingyun vermilion token. Did cousin not use it? Zhongshou's lips twitched when he heard that. Why was this Zhongling's tone exactly the same as that of the dead Zhongyu? As expected from cousins, they were pretty much made from the same mold. Yin Yang and Chu Shui's expressions suddenly changed. Their eyes were sharp as they looked coldly at the two people in front of them. That unfamiliar middle-aged man shook his head and sighed. This is what they mean by not giving up until they reach the Yellow Springs. Brother Yin, I told you long ago. Your trip to Pill Spirit Mountain might not go according to your wishes. You didn't want to believe me. So what now? You agreed then. At least it was better than losing all your face on Pill Spirit Mountain. Yin Yang's neck had green veins popping out. The muscles on his body tightened up, and his face was extremely ugly. Zhongsho's eyes lit up. He could tell that this person was Feng Xiao, who spoke to Yin Yang that day by the bridge. The matter today was simple. Just thinking about it, he knew the reason why Liang Miaozi from Ling Yun's sect rejected them. Shui gritted her teeth. You're despicable. Despicable? Feng Xiao burst out into a laugh, his face filled with disdain. Since we are opponents, then naturally we have to be unscrupulous. When the ruler did things, he was 10 times more vicious than my young master. In the end, wasn't it your own choice? Moreover, although that senior agreed to lend us a hand, he also gave the crown prince a chance. As long as the prince passes the test, even my young master Zhong sure won't be able to. Before he could finish his sentence, Zhong Ling sneered. What's the point of saying so much? Trash is still trash. Even if he had the soaring cloud sect order in his hand, he would still be useless. However, cousin, you are really lucky being carried down a mountain by Shui. In the past, although I saw that you were useless, you still had some backbone. Today, you have thrown away the face of my Zhong family. You don't know how to walk? Why aren't you coming down? Shui clenched her fists tightly, her cheeks flushing red. She was furious, wanted to punch out and smash Zongling's face into a pancake. Young master isn't trash. 343 breaths to break the small heaven sword formation, not using spiritual energy to draw out the 12 god talismans. How many people in the world can compare to him? The glory of the Pill Spirit Mountain Dao Palace, the heroic bearing of drawing the sword in 99 breaths. No one in the world can do that. Just as she was about to retort, Zhongsho laughed and patted her shoulder. Sorry, sorry. Little brother is trash. I have really dragged you down. However, brother also knows that Zhongsho's body is too weak and can only let Shui carry him down. Speaking of which, Shui is my maid. If I want her to carry me, she can do whatever she wants. What does that have to do with you, cousin? After he said that, he hugged Chu Shui even more openly, his expression intimate. Originally, he was thinking that if people saw him, he wouldn't be able to see anyone in the future. Now that someone said that, Zhongsho didn't want to come down anymore. Zongling's face instantly turned green from anger, his eyes looking at Chu Shui with a dark expression. After a long while, he took in a deep breath. After calming down, he gave a self-mocking laugh, his face cold and arrogant as he brushed past the 3 of them. So you still think that we are blood relatives? If you are willing to give up the throne and scram out of Donglin Cloud Continent, my elder brother and I can spare your life. Only now do I, Zhongling, know how naive I am. Brother Shou, take care of yourself. I only hope that one day you can return to Gantian Mountain alive. When Feng Xiao saw the situation, he couldn't help but sigh once more, looking at Yin Yang. Brother Yin, the situation is clear. Do you still want to follow this trash? If you have the heart, I can persuade young master to give you another chance. Yin Yang laughed involuntarily, the corner of his lips curling up, his tone filled with unspeakable sarcasm. The situation is clear? That might not be the case. Chapter 32. Coming down from the mountain path, in just a few tens of steps, the 3 of them returned to the carriage. The rain outside was getting more and more intense, the wind blowing. Even the unknown spiritual formation on the carriage was unable to stabilize the body of the carriage. However, Yin Yang's face was no longer gloomy and worried. Be it his eyes or his actions, they were all open-minded. Zhongsho and Chu Shui got off and stood at the entrance of the carriage. They only felt that the bones and tendons in their bodies were about to fall apart. That deep exhaustion struck them. However, they bore with it, not in a rush to rest. Instead, they turned their heads and asked Yin Yang, Uncle Yin, you really don't regret it? Once we leave Pill Spirit Mountain, even if we want to regret it, we won't be able to. Similar words were said by Yin Yang to them on the mountain path. Zhongsho directly asked back. Yin Yang didn't hesitate, his brows furrowing. Since the prince isn't afraid of death, then what does Yin Yang have to fear? Even if it's a path to hell. So what if Yin Yang walks it with the prince? Zhongsho didn't say anything, turning to Chu Shui, smiling with deep meaning. Shui, it seems like I have underestimated you. What happened to you in these 3 years in Gantian Mountain? Forget about Zhongyu. Even this Zhongling likes you so much? Chu Shui's face immediately turned red, and steam seemed to be coming out of her head. She stuttered, wanting to explain. However, Zhongsho giggled and pinched her cheeks. Forget it. My Shui has always been loved by everyone, and flowers bloom when they see her. Hee. Zhongling that fellow. Let him be jealous to death. However, in this life, I won't leave you. I, young lord, will remember this. The first few sentences were said in a joking tone. However, when he said that he wouldn't leave you, his tone was extremely serious. Chu Shui was slightly startled. When she came back to her senses, Zhongsho had already stepped into the carriage. The moment he returned to the carriage, Zhongsho laid down softly, his limbs spread out, his meridians and muscles twitching. The pain was even worse than when he fought with Zhongyu and Blazing Sword Wu Wei. However, maybe because he had already adapted to this body, he didn't immediately faint like last time. With such a body quality, if I go all out, I won't even last 15 minutes. Laughing bitterly, Zhongsho bore with the intense pain and tiredness, sitting up once more. He made a 5 hearts facing the sky posture, merging with heaven and earth before checking his dantian. In just a moment, Zhongsho took in a deep breath. He almost lost control of his state of mind, and his complexion alternated between green and white. He was both surprised and happy. The cold current just now was actually this thing. Within his energy C foundation chakra, there were 18 more sword-shaped energy flowing in his chakra meridians. It should have been a different type of true chi, but it merged perfectly with the energy in his meridians and acupoints. There was no conflict at all, and they merged together. In fact, he was even able to slightly activate it with his mind. However, it was limited to within his chakra meridians and couldn't be forced out of his body. There were also threads of intent hidden within, sharp and domineering. However, it was extremely restrained, and one couldn't feel any sharpness at all. Zhongsho couldn't be more familiar with the aura of these sword-shaped energies. These sword energies are most likely the cloud, shocking god, destroying sword intent that was passed down by the Lingyun ancestor. That means that the legend is true. Within his body were the 18 sword intent spiritual seeds that contained the secrets of the Lingyun sect's cloud, shocking absolute sword. Sword force, sword chi, sword radiance, sword rhyme, sword force, sword intent, sword soul, all the secrets and methods to use them were contained in the form of seeds. As long as one studied, nurtured, one would be able to truly grasp it and easily learn this Lingyun sect's secret sword technique in the future. Rumors had it that when Lingyun sect's Yin Feibai made his debut, he had already grasped a portion of the cloud, shocking god, destroying sword intent, which was why he was invincible in Donglin Cloud Continent. Even those heaven-rank experts had to give way to this junior who had only reached the Earth Wheel realm. Many people were guessing how Yin Feibai learned this martial path intent that far exceeded his own realm. Some people guessed that it came from the Lingyun sect's ancestral hall, the holy land of martial arts. Some people guessed that it came from the first generation 18 sword puppets that Yin Feibai personally destroyed on the Sky Sword platform. The proof was that all of the cloud-soaring sect disciples on the 5 continents and the 4 cloud islands who had broken the minor heaven soar formation had more or less mastered the cloud-shocking god, extinguishing sword intent. However, this guess had never been proven. However, when he thought about that, Zhongsho's first thought wasn't surprise, but a sigh in his heart. The Sky Sword platform of the Lingyun sect wasn't just at this Pill Spirit Mountain. All the bases of the 5 continents and 4 islands had the same small heaven sword formation. Even those 12 Godstone tablets were exactly the same. It was similar to the situation in Donglin Cloud Continent. After 10,000 years, no one was able to break it. However, 2 years later, starting from that Yen Fei Bai, in just a short 10 years, the puppet stone tablets of the 5 continents and 4 islands were either forcefully broken or successfully copied. Within the Lingyun sect, tens of geniuses rose up, shining like stars. Looking out at the entire cloud world, there were many geniuses, and experts were as common as the clouds. Close to 10,000 years of martial arts accumulation in the cloud world exploded out before the spiritual energy wave arrived. The era of the Divine Emperor was also an era that truly belonged to the peerless powerhouses. Today, he broke the formation and copied the talismans. In the eyes of others, it was like a legend, unbelievable. However, if it happened a few decades later, there wouldn't be many people who would be surprised. That was because there were simply too many people who could do it. At that time, the so-called geniuses were like the sand in the Ganges River, uncountable. After sighing, Zhongsho started to analyze the 18-cloud, shocking god-destroying sword intents, the pros and cons to him. Using the experience of his last life, he used his mind to probe. Only after 2 hours did he confirm that there was an 80% chance that the Lingyun ancestor didn't do anything to the sword intent spiritual seeds. The reason why it was 80% was because there were more comprehensive probing methods that Zhongsho couldn't use. The deeper layers of the sword energy were things that he couldn't touch at this moment. The moment he relaxed, a look of joy appeared on Zhongsho's face. He didn't care about the cloud-shocking pinnacle sword. Even these 18-cloud shocking god-destroying sword intents that came from the Lingyun ancestor were only at an acceptable level in Zhongsho's eyes. However, at this moment, these sword intent spiritual seeds were like charcoal in the snow to him. Using his mind to control, he caused all the sword energy to flow through the foundation and breathing meridians and all the apertures. As expected, where it passed, all the different types of true qi and impurities were destroyed by the 18-sword intense spiritual seeds. He could easily assimilate them or expel them out his body. The only thing that gave him a headache was that these sword energy seeds were absorbing and assimilating the purest true qi in his body at every moment. Naturally, this situation was within his expectations. If what he expected was right, this cloud-shocking god, destroying sword intent, would be even more effective when he was training his energy and breaking through his meridians. The puppets of the small heaven sword formation are the 18-cloud, shocking god, destroying sword intents. Then, are the warm currents within the stone, steals the god talisman spiritual seeds? Zhongsho turned his mind back to the depths of his soul. As expected, he saw that around the budding spiritual sea, there were 12 talismans circling it. He identified them one by one. They were heaven, earth, yin, yang, metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, and luck. Chapter 33. All the god talisman seeds were neatly arranged outside his soul power ocean, like the clocks of the future. Left and right were symmetrical, with the heaven word at the head and the luck word at the end. Similar to those sword intent spirit seeds, they were continuously absorbing his soul power to nourish themselves. Even his energy swallowing technique was nearly unable to keep up with the swallowing speed of these spirit seeds. Zhongsho sighed to himself. He knew that after today, there would be 2 more true essence swallowing giants in his body. Luckily, having these god talismans wasn't without benefits. These talismans could also purify the soul. Their effects were only slightly weaker than the sky mirror soul shining technique. They could also strengthen his soul and help him suppress his dual meridian body in the future. Following which, Zhongsho's attention was attracted by that luck word. Who knows if it was because the last stone tablet was broken, but out of the 12 god talisman seeds, this luck word was the largest and most complete. Zhongsho's mind slightly touched it, and he felt an eagerness to try. He felt that he should be able to use his own strength to draw out the power of this god talisman. However, how is that possible? If he didn't borrow the power of the stone tablet to copy it, A spirit cultivator would need to be at the body-shaping realm to draw the god talisman. That was the peak realm that spirit masters could reach today. Pretty much at the same time, on the first stone step at the foot of Pill Spirit Mountain, Zhongling and Feng Xiao were standing with their hands behind their backs. They coldly looked at the carriage in the distance as it slowly went further and further away, disappearing into the storm outside the mountain. At this moment, Feng Xiao's brows were furrowed. Logically speaking, since Zhongshou was chased out of Lingyun's sect, the goal of this trip to Pill Spirit Mountain had already been achieved. Following this, they only needed to coldly look on from the side and see what happened to the three of them. However, for some unknown reason, Feng Xiao felt inexplicably uneasy after meeting the heir of the Crown Prince just now. She felt that she had missed out on something. On the other hand, Zhongling's expression was even uglier. A cold light flashed in her blue eyes. He stood still for a long time before he suddenly snorted. Sooner or later, I will personally cut this Zhongshou into 1,000 pieces to vent my hatred. Then, as if he was deep in thought, he said, "Uncle Feng, I often heard from my elder brother that you have a wide circle of friends in the eastern cities, right? With Uncle Feng's ability, you should be able to help me contact some people within half a month." Feng Xiao was secretly shocked, and for a moment, he forgot his previous struggle. He turned around and said anxiously, "Young Masterling, are you going to directly attack Zhongshou?" This was absolutely unacceptable. Although the ruler was dead, the people of Gantian Mountain were still there. Most of his trusted subordinates held important positions. Young Master Zhongshu still needed time to recruit the various races. This Zhongshou can die in anyone's hands, but you and I will never stain our hands with his blood. Just as he was thinking that this young man wasn't calm enough, panicking over a small maidservant. Following which, Feng Xiao saw the team beside him shake his head and laugh. "Uncle Feng, you don't have to worry. Naturally, Zhongling knows the pros and cons of this. I asked Uncle Feng to invite people over just in case." As she said that, Zhongling paused, her expression turning serious. "My cousin gave me a feeling that he was a little unusual. He didn't care at all. In the past, he wouldn't be so magnanimous." "Huh. Actually, Uncle Feng doesn't have to care. It is most probably my imagination. He is just a piece of trash. Could he really escape from the palms of those two?" Feng Xiao's mind shook. It turned out that he wasn't the only one who had this feeling. However, after thinking about it for a moment, Feng Xiao also found it amusing. He was probably too suspicious. An 8 Meridian mythic master, a maidservant with some strength, along with that prince who panted after walking a few steps. How big of a wave could they cause? No matter how the situation changed, no matter how many variables there were, they wouldn't be able to change the final outcome of the three of them. Scoffing slightly with a mocking intent, Feng Xiao's brows relaxed. "Don't worry, young master. I will do my best to protect Chu Shui's life. Only that Yin Yang is a little unfortunate. Not only does he come from a famous family, but he also has other secrets." Just as he said that, he saw a cloud descend from the sky and land in front of the mountain gate. A teen cultivator walked out from within. It was Huang Yi who had brought Zhongshou and the other two up the mountain. Looking at the two people below, Huang Yi's eyes flashed before calming down. He asked expressionlessly, "Are the two of you here waiting for Senior Master Liang Yaozi?" The arrogance on Zhongling's face instantly retracted. Feng Xiao's face was filled with flattery as he bowed and smiled. "That's right. My prince has some relationship with Senior Liang Yaozi. The two of us are here on his orders. We have a small gift for Senior Liang Yaozi." "Small gift?" Huang Yi's brows furrowed, following which he laughed silently. "Coincidentally, Senior Master also has a sentence for me to pass to the two of you." Zhongling and Feng Xiao instantly raised their heads, their eyes filled with shock. In the next moment, they felt a heavy paw in their ears. They didn't know how the young cultivator in front of them moved, but their right cheeks felt like they were hit by a hammer. The huge strength caused the two of them to fly hundreds of feet away. They only felt dizzy, their necks nearly breaking. Luckily, the two of them were mythic masters and came back to their senses at the same time. Feng Shao only felt flustered and terrified. He did not know what had gone wrong. Zhongling was furious, the veins on his face popping out, killing intent exploding out. Even Lingyun's sect, the top sect in Donglin Cloud Continent, couldn't humiliate a direct bloodline disciple of the Sky Fox Zhong family for no reason. However, before they were able to speak, another heavy paw sounded out in their ears. This time it hit the left side of their faces, the strength even stronger than before. Their bodies flew out 1,000 feet, falling into the mud, looking really bad. That miserable state caused a few cloud-soaring sect disciples behind Huang to turn their heads away, as they couldn't bear to see it. Huang he didn't care at all, standing on the stone steps, looking down coldly at the two of them. Senior Master asked me to pass on a message. He has already done what you asked him to do. However, Senior Master will remember today's revenge in his heart. From today onwards, he will cut ties with that misty Jinren. 10 years later, he will personally find all of you to settle the score. Following which Huang, he reached out and grabbed. A wooden box that fell from Feng Zhao's body flew into his hand, laughing coldly. I will accept your gift on behalf of Senior Master. I will give the two of you 5 days. Within 5 days, if you are still within this Sudia mountain range, my Lingyun sect will take your lives. This sentence is the decree of my Pill Spirit Mountain's first seat. After saying that, Huang Yi acted like nothing had happened, walking to the back of the giant mountain gate and standing still. His face was filled with smiles like nothing had happened. In the mud, Feng Zhao's body was trembling, his eyes filled with fear. Zhongling's face was ashen white, no longer showing any anger, only uneasiness and fear. Lingyun's sect had always had a transcendent position, never involving themselves in the battles of the 5 continents and 10 islands. There was also never anyone who would easily offend Lingyun's sect, which was why they always showed a kind image to others. There was definitely a reason why they suddenly showed such animosity towards the two of them. It was even more baffling that Liang Miaozi viewed them as enemies. Unknowingly, Feng Shao and Zhongling's gazes met once more. Both of them saw doubt and shock in each other's eyes. Just what had happened at the peak of Pill Spirit Mountain in the past few hours? Why would there be such a change all of a sudden? Chapter 34. The next day at noon, Zhongsho sat on the soft couch in the carriage, his body shaking along with the shaking of the carriage. At this moment, he was in a daze. After an unknown period of time, he sighed with an incomparably bitter expression. What should I do? The favor I owe the ancestor of the Lingyun sect is getting bigger and bigger. Ever since he knew that the 12 god talisman seeds could help him draw out the 12 god talismans when they were nurtured to a certain level, he felt that it was impossible. Zhongsho knew that the gift of the Lingyun sect ancestor far exceeded his expectations. Just the 18 cloud, shocking god-destroying sword intents were already a huge help. Along with these god talismans, the benefits were even more obvious. Yesterday, he was simply too tired and didn't think too much. Only until he slept for a full day and night, when he woke up and started his daily energy cultivation and meditation, did he start to feel troubled. In his last life, he was one of the 7 emperors of the cloud world. His martial arts were enough to be on the same level as the top people of the 10 shrines of the cloud world. However, that was after all his last life, and it was in the virtual world. As for his current body, be it the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword intent or the god talismans, he had to treasure them all. What made Zhongsho feel conflicted was that if he got these things today, how would he attack the Lingyun sect in the future? The grievances in the virtual world, the pressure in the real world, even breaking his meridians, he could magnanimously put it down and not bother about it. Only the Lingyun sect's book hiding cave and the ancestral hall were too tempting. Forget it. With my cultivation, I can't get out this sword intent god talisman. If I have a chance in the future, I'll think of a way to repay this favor. Speaking of which, if I can't get over my own death, what's the point of talking about the future? Am I worrying about nothing? Thinking about it this way, Zhongsho felt at ease and once again started his interrupted cultivation. The path of energy cultivation and meditation was all about focus. The moment Zhongsho entered a meditative state, he didn't have any thoughts. Threads of true energy were forcefully extracted from the beast crystal in his hand. It was guided into his qi sea. He forcefully gathered balls of true qi, like a spear piercing towards the part of the breathing meridian that wasn't connected, forcefully opening it up without caring about anything. However, unlike before, this long spear of genuine qi contained a total of 18 spiritual seeds of sword will. His qi gene, which was already strong to begin with, now had a sharpness and fierceness that was not there in the past. It pretty much used a sweeping momentum to break open all the acupoints in the breathing meridian that hadn't been opened. Within his qi sea, a series of explosions could be heard, like the roar of thunder. The vital energy in his body surged, causing his white skin to swell up and turn red. Zhongsho's expression didn't change at all. After a light shout, he took a deep breath. Then, the air within the carriage started to swirl. Like a small tornado, all the air and spirit energy surged into Zhongsho's mouth and nose. His lungs were also like bottomless pits, faintly emitting the sound of wind and thunder. When he spat out, there was also a loud explosion. The air that he had sucked in before was expelled out along with gusts of energy. In just one breath, all the acupoints in the foundation and breathing meridians were all opened up. They were like two rings that surrounded his sea of qi and his navel. After the breathing meridian is the marrow meridian. Without any hesitation, Zhongsho directed all the remaining true energy in his chakra meridians to enter the marrow meridian. The entire marrow meridian was an irregular chakra that wrapped around his body. Similar to the other chakra meridians, it had 24 acupoints. Zhongsho used all his energy to open up 2 of them. Then, before the true energy was used up, he forcefully stopped it. Today, with the help of the cloud, shocking God, destroying sword intent, the injuries he suffered from forcefully opening his chakra meridians were far less than what he had expected. Even if he opened up 1 or 2 more acupoints, it wouldn't be a problem. However, there had to be a limit to energy cultivation and meditation. His foundation and breathing meridians were progressing too quickly. In a short 3 months, he had opened them all. He didn't even have time to accumulate. That foundation and breathing spiritual fist was only at the small success stage. It wasn't able to strengthen his foundation and breathing meridians to the point where his foundation was like a boulder and his energy was like a fountain. If his foundations weren't firm, how would he be able to build that heaven-reaching tower? He dissipated all of his true qi. He allowed it to circulate within his meridians on its own. Zhongsho saw that the sky was still covered in dark clouds. Since he couldn't use the sky mirror soul shining technique, he decided not to meditate. He only took out a willow leaf flying knife and held it in his hand. His eyes were filled with seriousness. The 6-god defensive knife technique was the purest martial cultivation technique, merging the aura, strength, intent, soul, and spirit of a martial cultivator into the flying knife. This was the 6-god defensive knife technique. Maybe it wasn't as convenient as the artifact controlling technique of a spirit cultivator. When it was deep, it could take the head of a person from 10,000 miles away. However, once the knife was pulled out, its nimbleness was even better than the artifact controlling technique. The strength of its power and the strength of its explosiveness wasn't something that those spiritual artifacts and magical treasures could compare to. In a last life, Zhongsho was the purest martial cultivator. After obtaining this 6-god defensive knife technique, he naturally cultivated according to it and didn't find anything wrong with it. However, in this life, he had no choice but to become a spirit and martial cultivator. Zhongsho couldn't suppress the urge to merge his soul power into this technique. However, in these short 3 months, he naturally didn't have any results. The only result was that the connection between the 5 flying knives in his sleeves and his spiritual sense became closer. However, these few months of testing had unknowingly opened up a small back door that could increase the strength of these flying knives. He thought about it repeatedly until the dark sky outside the carriage window turned dark. Only then did a sharp glow appear in Zhongsho's eyes. This method can work. However, it's hard to grasp the degree within. Without hesitating, Zhongsho once again felt the sword-intense spiritual seeds in his body. He randomly chose one and wrapped threads of spiritual sense around it. The other end of these spiritual sense threads was the willow mark knife in Zhongsho's hand. He was actually using the imprinting technique to turn his spiritual sense into a similar sword intent and inject it into the mark knife. This was also a spirit master spiritual sense technique that Zhongsho knew in his last life, known as the talisman sealing technique. It was originally a Taoist secret technique that only a small number of top talisman masters could grasp. In the future, it was spread far and wide. It was a necessity for people who cultivated talismans. Although they often only had the shape and not the spirit, it was still quite magical. At this moment, Zhongsho only needed to slightly modify it, and it became his imprinting sword intent technique. However, only Zhongsho, relying on the huge amount of martial path experience that he accumulated in his last life, could use his spiritual sense to successfully copy and imitate this cloud-shocking god-destroying sword intent. As time went on, bean-sized beads of sweat appeared on Zhongsho's forehead. The aura of the mark knife in his hand slowly changed. A cold light flowed, and the tip of the knife became sharper, like something was about to break out from within the knife body. In just a moment, the entire willow mark knife exploded into pieces. Tins of white light scattered in all directions. It was also extremely sharp. Without any sound, it was nailed into the four walls of the carriage. It pierced deeply into the steel plate, leaving no traces at all. Even Zhongsho's right hand retreated extremely quickly. It was also cut by the flying knife shrapnel, causing tens of bloody wounds. Zhongsho didn't care and didn't feel that it was a pity. Only his brows furrowed slightly. It is made of elite steel blood copper, but it still can't take it. Is this sword intent too strong? What I can imprint is only the most shallow surface. As expected from the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword, able to destroy celestials and gods. He flipped his hand and took out another willow mark knife, using the talisman sealing technique to imprint the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword intent. However, this time, in just a short moment, it exploded into pieces once more. This repeated until the fourth time. Zhongsho's face was totally devoid of blood. A willow leaf talisman knife lay quietly in his palm. It was still a green-colored knife body with blood patterns within. However, if one looked carefully, one would notice that within the knife body, there were threads of cloud patterns swimming about. P.S. First update, please support me and encourage me to open up new lands. Oh, apart from recommending and collecting, there's also a Sanjiang recommendation ticket. If you have time, please help me recommend it. I am really grateful. Chapter 35. The cloud pattern surged, causing lumps of cloud light to appear around the talisman saber, making it look ethereal and uncertain. Apart from that, the glow at the tip of the knife became even brighter. Zhongsho's brows were still tightly furrowed, and he didn't show any joy. I can only obtain the power, but not the intent. Using soul power to copy the cloud, shocking god, destroying sword, intent isn't the true intent of a martial cultivator. Muttering softly, Zhongsho wondered if his expectations were too high. The cloud, shocking god, destroying sword intent that he copied onto the willow mark knife was only a tiny bit. However, to martial artists who were still at the bodily chakra level, it was a level they couldn't deal with. Even Xiantian Earth Chakra experts would find it hard to block. If it was 3 months ago, he would have fought with Burning Sword Wu Wei once more. His knife wouldn't have just taken his eye, but it would have directly pierced his brain and taken his life. He took out the last willow mark knife and continued to copy the sword intent. This time, the amount was slightly reduced. However, it only lasted for a quarter of an hour before the entire flying dagger exploded into pieces. Zhongsho shook his head. The success just now should be an exception. The red copper distribution and overall structure of the willow mark knife were far more logical and sturdy than the other four knives. If such a weak sword intent couldn't be added, then it was a problem with the material. However, these willow mark knives were the best talisman weapons that he could obtain in a short time. Better flying knives needed to be custom-made by Taishang families with high-grade spirit blacksmiths like Baobing House. Moreover, they were expensive, or he could buy better materials and refine it himself. Although the success rate is small, it is still very high. However, if I copy the sword intent, the strength is still not bad. I can continue in the future. Zhongsho thought for a moment before hiding the only successful talisman knife in his sleeves. He took out another 4 similar willow mark knives and hid them in his sleeves. When he hid them in his clothes, no traces of them could be seen. He didn't have the intention to continue experimenting. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't. Firstly, his current spiritual energy was almost depleted. Secondly, there were only 5 flying daggers that could truly communicate with the spirit. Just as Zhongsho was about to send his consciousness into the depths of his soul to observe the 12 god talisman seeds outside his soul sea, especially the luck word, a voice rang out. Outside the carriage, a voice asked, "Young master, are you free now?" Was it Yin-Yang? Zhongsho's mind moved slightly, and he guessed the reason behind it. He stopped his meditation and smiled. "Uncle Yin, just come in." A tall figure stepped into the room. It was Yin-Yang. His expression was somewhat solemn. After glancing at Zhongsho, his eyes revealed a slightly different expression, after which he walked to the soft couch and sat down cross-legged. He probed, could it be that the crown prince has already cultivated the embryonic and breathing meridians? Zhongsho also knew that he could not hide it from him, so he smiled and nodded, admitting it. Once the embryonic and breathing meridians were cultivated, there would be some energy seeping out of the body of a martial artist. At this moment, Zhongsho had just opened up these 2 meridians and was far from being able to control it. High-grade martial artists could easily find out. Yin-Yang's eyes instantly lit up, following which his expression turned serious. The prince's talent is not something normal people can compare to. I don't know how the prince managed to cultivate the embryonic and breathing meridians in just 3 months. However, I still have to remind the prince that it is more important to know the foundations of a martial artist. You can't rush for quick results. Zhongsho smiled bitterly. How would he not know this theory? However, he also knew that the other party had good intentions. Luckily, this Yin-Yang didn't beat around the bush, solemnly instructing him with a few sentences. He returned to the main topic. When the ruler left Gantian Mountain, he only asked me and Chu Shui to bring the prince out of Lin Hai College to Lingyun's sect. As for the rest, he didn't say anything else. It seems like the ruler didn't expect yesterday's matter at that time. However, since the prince isn't willing to join Lingyun's sect, then in the future, the 3 of us will have to plan ahead. Zhongsho nodded his head once more, knowing that this was the right theory. Just now, he had also guessed that Yin-Yang came to find him for this matter. Sure enough, Yin-Yang's tone changed. He took out a rough animal skin map and gestured with it. His face revealed a bit of inquisitiveness. There are 5 ways out of Misttown to get out of the Sudia Mountains. One is to go back the same way through Dragon Lake Plains to return to Gantian Mountain. The other path was to head east. It would take about 1,000 miles to reach the shore of the Cloud Sea in the east. There was a Cloud Saint city there. Although it isn't a huge port, one can still find boats to go out to sea. Apart from that, there are 3 small paths, but they're all filled with beasts. There are a few grade 6 beast kings that even Lingyun's sect can't do anything about. Our cloud crossing carriage is really hard to pass through. Zhongsho smiled. Yin-Yang said so much, but there were only 2 paths. Was it to escape from Donglin Cloud Continent, or to return to Gantian Mountain to fight for the position of Monster King? Rubbing his chin, Zhongsho took in a deep breath. In the end, he smiled slightly, pointing to the east of the bee skin map. Let's make a trip to Cloud Saint City first. He remembered that place. It was not far from Cloud Saint City. This year, it wasn't the time for it to appear in the world. It only appeared after the first wave of spiritual energy. That year was also the beginning of the Godly Emperor game 10,000 years later. However, if he remembered correctly, there was a heaven and earth spiritual treasure growing nearby. A few of them should have matured. They weren't especially precious, but he could use them recently. There was also that item that he could take out. This was also the reason why he dared to reject Ling Yun's sect. However, these few paths are a little inappropriate. It's best to pass through here. Yin Yang was slightly startled. Zhongsho's finger drew a thin line on the beast's skin. It was a flat path that led to the east of the Sudian mountain range. Prince, that is the Black Soil Swamp, a part of Dragon Lake Plains. Although there aren't any high-grade beasts, our cloud crossing carriage still can't pass through. This path was definitely out of the expectations of the three of them. However, the most famous thing in the Black Soil Swamp wasn't the beasts hiding in the swamp. It was groups of swamp wolves as well as large amounts of corpse-eating ants. They were pretty much invincible in the swamp. Even grade 5 and grade 6 beasts would avoid them. So, this car of ours needs to be slightly modified, or we can directly change it. Our current speed is still too slow. Thinking about the physique of this body, without a carriage, it would be hard for him to travel. Zhongsho mocked himself, pointing to the map once more. Let's make a trip to Xiaoyuan City. I heard that this place produces steel. The place that Zhongsho pointed to was close to Pill Spirit Mountain, less than 300 miles away. Be it in the God Emperor game or in ancient records, this Xiaoyuan City could be called the eastern mining capital of Donglin Cloud Continent. It produced iron ores as well as various other metals. It was a sacred place for early spirit blacksmiths and spirit blacksmiths. Even if it wasn't on the scale of the future, it wouldn't lack materials and spirit blacksmiths. Yin Yang was deep in thought, looking closely at the wind wall formation carved on the carriage. In the end, he gave out a bitter laugh. Forget it. We'll follow what the prince wants. Coming out of Xiaoyuan City, we can enter the Black Soil Swamp. We know that we aren't strong enough, but we still want to fight with those people. It's no different from asking to die. Leaving to avoid them is also a good plan. Zhongsho's brows instantly rose up coldly, knowing that Yin Yang had misunderstood his meaning. The reason he rushed to Cloud Saint City wasn't to escape from Donglin Cloud Continent. P.S. Continue to update. Please recommend and bookmark. My new book ranking is in danger, and the votes from Sanjiang haven't gone up yet. Please help. Chapter 36. Zhongsho had no intention of fighting for the Monster King position in Gantian Mountain. Ruling over 1 million monster race was indeed a huge power. However, if he wanted to sit on that position, he would have to work hard. If he wasn't careful, he would be attacked by those human race countries and the various sects of the cloud world. However, with his personality, he wasn't willing to be chased out of Donglin Cloud Continent. Anyways, before the spiritual wave arrived, he didn't have any thoughts of leaving this region. Smiling expressionlessly, Zhongsho didn't want to waste time explaining. He looked at the east side of the map, where the 3 words Gantian Mountain were, using a consulting tone. Uncle Ian, Zhongsho hasn't returned in 3 years. When I was young, I was ignorant and didn't know much about the people around me. What is the situation in Gantian Mountain? Apart from Zhongsho and Zhongyu, who else would attack me? Yin Yang looked at Zhongsho in shock, slightly hesitating before answering. The prince's cousin Zhongsho is the true direct bloodline of the Sky Fox Zhong family, under the Xian Mountain sect. His master, Xian Mountain Gang, Yi, is said to be the person with the highest chance of breaking through to the ascended ancestor in the past 100 years. Young Master Zhongsho is also the most outstanding talent in the Donglin Cloud Continent in these 10 years. Rumors have it that he has already reached the Xiantian realm. When the ruler was here, he was seen as a candidate to take over the position of Monster King by many large races. Zhongsho's eyes constricted. Xian Mountain Gangyi. He had heard of this name before. In this era, anyone who could leave an impression on him was either strong or outstanding or had a special influence on this era and the future. This gang Yi obviously belonged to the former. In his heart, he labeled this Zhongshe as a strong enemy. Only then did Zhongshe's attention be pulled back by Yin Yang's words. This person's voice is really high, and his power is also the strongest. However, in the Zhong family, there are two people who can go up against him. One is young Master Zhongyang. It is said that his talent is only a little lower than Zhongshe. When Yin Yang was ordered by the ruler to leave Gantian Mountain, this person had already reached the peak of the body chakra realm. This person's father, Zhong Hao, was the head of the Zhong clan. As such, he was extremely powerful. Behind him was his brother, Zhong Xuan. Like Zhong Hao, he had entered the Xiantian realm and opened up the earth chakra. The ruler relied on him as his left and right arm, controlling at least 20% of Gantian Mountain's troops. If the two of them worked together, they could suppress young Master Zhongshe. Hearing this, Zhongshe frowned. Two peak Wu Zongs who had opened 6 meridians of the earth chakra realm. The strength of Gantian Mountain was much stronger than what he had guessed. He clearly remembered that Gantian Mountain and the Sky Fox Zong family should have been totally unknown and wiped out long ago. Yin Yang saw the change in Zhongshe's expression, but he did not want to make him lose his confidence completely. After describing the three of them, his tone changed once more. Prince, although the three of them are strong, this Gantian Mountain is still the foundation of the ruler. The ruler came from a humble background, and in the past, he was just a bastard child of the Sky Fox Zong family. In 15 years, he used his own strength to make Gantian Mountain dominate the east of Donglin Cloud Continent. Before he disappeared, he had already occupied 7 provinces. Although other powers have taken over much of it, his strength is still there, and his foundations are not damaged. Zhongshe took in a deep cold breath. Occupying 7 provinces? Donglin Cloud Continent only had a total of 50 provinces. To be able to occupy 3 provinces, one could say that it was a big country. Naturally, the situation of the monster race was different from that of the human race. The amount of land they occupied was really small. However, to be able to control 7 provinces of the monster race, their strength was definitely at the top of the Donglin Cloud Continent. As for the Lingyun sect, they were not normal powers. This is why, although the ruler came from the Sky Fox Zong family, in the eyes of many people in Gantian Mountain, be it Zhongshe or Zhong Hao, they are all outsiders who took advantage of the situation and took over the ruler's foundations. Although I am worried about the prince, my strength is not enough. However, I also have doubts about these few people. It won't be so easy to take over the ruler's position. Laughing coldly, a cold glow appeared in Yin Yang's eyes, his tone calm. The monster race under the ruler has reached 4 million, a total of 147 races. However, there are only 4 people who can decide who the Monster King belongs to. One is the Iron Tiger race leader, Hu Qinxiu. The second is the Wind Bear race leader, Chai Yuan. The third is the I Wolf race leader, Ling Feikong. And the last is Qiu Wei, who is one of the left and right pillars of Gantian Mountain, along with Zhong Xuan. The first 3 are all leaders of large races. Their strength is only weaker than the Zhong family. The last one also controls 20% of the Gantian Mountain army. He is the person who followed the ruler the earliest. These 4 people are all 8 meridians of the earth chakra level, Xuanwu ancestors. The ruler also has a few good friends who are also at the peak of the Xuanwu realm. These few people won't sit still and watch the prince be bullied. Today, no one is able to confirm whether the ruler is dead or alive. Zhongshe was already shocked to the point that he was numb. He had 3 million monster race under him, a total of 147 races. The Zhong family race leader was already at the peak of the martial ancestor realm. One could imagine the strength of Gantian Mountain. He only confirmed the information that Yin Yang said with Zhongshe's 13 years of memories. As expected, a few faces appeared in his mind. At that time, these few people were really close to Zhongshe. Only Hu Qinxiu was really cold and indifferent towards him. At that time, Zhongshe was still a kid and naturally couldn't see through anything. However, he who had gone through 2 lifetimes knew that these few people were all really scheming and deep, such that one couldn't see through them. The last 2 sentences were also in agreement. If it wasn't for those people having worries in their hearts, the people who attacked him last time wouldn't just be a small person like Zhong Yu and 2 mythic masters. Ling Feikong is biased towards Zhong Shi. Chai Yuan is biased towards Zhong Yang. Zuiqiu Tingzhu isn't biased. Only that Hu Qianxiu is the most loyal to the ruler, and his position is still undecided. However, these 4 people are all the ruler's trusted aides. As long as the prince has enough ability and calls for help, these 4 most probably won't not listen. Like he knew that such a situation definitely wouldn't happen and wasn't realistic. Yin Yang sighed slightly, barely managing to maintain his calm. Apart from that, although the other race leaders aren't as strong as these 4. However, if they work together, their strength isn't weak. Many of them hold positions in Gantian Mountain, and there are many people who can speak. They are really important. Anyways, Zhong Shi and the others have to worry about the thoughts of the old subordinates of the ruler and won't go too far. The prince still has a chance of winning. Zhong Shi scoffed to himself. He didn't ask all this to return to Gantian Mountain to fight for the position of the Monster King. He just wanted to be sure of the strength of the people who might chase after him in the future. However, the situation wasn't optimistic at all. If he was Zhong Shi or Zhong Yang or Zhong Xuan, after becoming the Monster King, the first person they would kill would be him to clear out the influence of his father in Gantian Mountain. The 3 of them wouldn't openly attack him, but that didn't mean that he was safe. Among his cousins, there might not be such an idiot like Zhong Yu. The enemy powers of Gantian Mountain could use his identity to do some things. As long as they cut him down, Gantian Mountain would be in chaos. It would cause the power that ruled Donglin Cloud Continent to collapse. How could he not be worried about such a situation? This was the first time Zhong Shi had the thought of going out to the ocean. Wasn't it better to take the chance to escape from Donglin Cloud Continent? His face was dark and uncertain. Suddenly, a loud explosion sounded out from the carriage beneath his feet. A few red flames rose up from the windows on both sides. A huge strength lifted up the carriage, causing it to roll 360 degrees in the air. Zhong Shi grabbed the handle of the soft couch right away, barely stabilizing his body. On the other hand, Yin Yang's eyes were spitting fire. Chapter 37. It's a spirit master. Scoffing furiously, Yin Yang held the knife in his right hand, his body turning into a streak of lightning as he sped out of the window. In the next moment, there was a light kung sound, and several painful cries spread out from outside the window. The cloud-crossing carriage finally landed, the entire body of the carriage giving out a huge tremor. The moment the carriage landed, Zhong Shi released his hand. His entire body was in midair, and only when the recoil from the carriage disappeared did he gently land back down, following which he nimbly avoided the windows on both sides. Then he lifted up a tea table in front of him to block the front of his body. This series of actions took less than a breath of time. Pretty much at the same time, 2 flying shuttles and 3 talismans charged in from the right side of the carriage window. They directly exploded in midair, numerous needle glows, and a sky full of ice rain exploding all around the carriage. A small half of them pinned onto the tea table in front of Zhong Shi, giving out a series of ding, 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 ding sounds. After this needle glows and ice rain, several balls of black mist exploded on both sides of the carriage. It was already nighttime, and the rain was pouring down, making it so that one couldn't even see their fingers when they stretched out their hands. When this black mist spread out, it made it so that within 1,000 feet of the carriage, one couldn't see anything. Zhong Shi's brows instantly rose up, killing without stopping. These people really wanted to take his life. He fiercely bit his fingertip, using blood as ink to draw 2 simple talismans at the side of his eyes and ears. One was for hearing, and the other was for seeing. Instantly, several streams of cool air surged in. Within 500 feet, pretty much all the sounds were heard by Zhong Shi. His vision suddenly became clear. Although he still couldn't see far, he could see 100 feet around him, only to see two black shadows using the cover of the mist to sneak in from outside the carriage window. However, before the two of them could clearly see the situation around them, two white lights shot out from Zhong Shou's sleeves, piercing into the throats of the two of them. Two silver-white lancet knives directly tore apart the vocal cords and trachea. The two black figures only had time to let out an almost inaudible hiss before they could no longer make another sound. They watched as Zhong Shou flashed over and grabbed their limb bodies. Then, he gently put them down until they leaned against the sides of the carriage. Throughout the entire process, there was not even the slightest sound. The pupils of the two shrank slightly. This person's methods and actions were even more experienced than theirs. Looking at his age, he was only around 13 years old. Was he really the Gantian mountain prince who didn't even have the strength to fight a chicken? Before they could figure out themselves, Zhong Shou's finger tapped heavily on their foreheads. After a moment of dizziness, the two of them lost all consciousness. Zhong Shou's movements did not stop at all. After picking up the swords in their hands, he left the cloud-crossing carriage. His movements were swift, just like the movements of a spirit fox. It was also silent. At this moment, outside of the carriage, numerous soybean-sized raindrops were swiftly falling down. The crackling sounds caused his eardrums to hurt. It also covered the sounds from Yin Yang and Chu Shui's side. There was also a crazy wind sweeping, cold like a knife. However, it was unable to chase away this thick black fog at all. Just as he left the carriage, Zhong Shou drew two more runes on his body. One was wind following, and the other was rain avoiding. When his body walked into the rain, his entire person was like an unsteady ball of energy hiding in the wind. When the raindrops fell, they also naturally slid to the sides. Looking carefully in front of him, he saw a masked man standing 100 feet away. He was wary, his eyes filled with suspicion as he looked in the direction of the cloud-crossing carriage. It was like he was wondering why there was no news from his two companions. A green glow flashed in his eyes, like he was also buffed by a Taoist technique, allowing him to see in this black fog. Zhong Shou laughed silently, his body sprinting like lightning. Just as the man was unable to react, he had already crossed 100 feet of space. The sword light flashed, directly stabbing into the skull of the man, who was trying to block in a panic. The tip of the sword twisted, not bothering to look at the outcome of his battle. Zhong Shou directly passed this person and continued to run towards the east. Just now, when the Taoist technique was activated, maybe other people couldn't sense it, but he was able to recognize that the spirit master who attacked had a 99% chance of being in this direction. This was not just the experience he had accumulated after experiencing thousands of dangerous battles in the virtual illusion. It was also the confidence of an ascended ancestor in real life. These two swords, one is wind stealth, one is shadow stepping. Both are talisman soldiers. They are even several times stronger than my pine pattern wind sword. Where did these people come from? In a short 10 breaths of running, Zhong Shou had already grasped the quality, weight, and ability of the two swords in his hands. However, this news made the doubt in Zhong Shou's eyes thicken. The pine pattern wind sword cost him a full grade 3 beast crystal. Before the spiritual wave started, it was worth 100,000 silver. In terms of value, the wind stealth and shadow stepping sword were even above the pine pattern wind sword. Even if the price was doubled on the basis of the pine pattern wind sword, 2 grade 3 beast crystals might not be enough to buy it. Where did these people come from to be so generous? A rank 3 demon beast was equivalent to a mythic master. It was already rare, and to kill it was even harder. Such a sword was personally forged by an intermediate spirit blacksmith, and even some mythic masters would treat it as a treasure. For it to be in the hands of these intermediate martial masters was really suspicious. In midair, there was a sudden explosion, only to hear Yin Yang's voice shout out the word kill. A ball of white flames instantly rose into the air, wrapping around a snow-white knife light. When the flaming blade flashed, a charred figure immediately fell from the sky. Why do I feel that the aura on Uncle Yin's body isn't right, like he's restricted by some restrictions? Last time when I formed my soul ocean, I felt it. This time when he was fighting with someone, it was even more obvious. Feeling weird, Zhongshou was unfazed, and he didn't turn his head to explain. He calmly activated the talismans on the two swords. Before this, he was hidden in the wind, and there was still some distance between him and the wind. However, at this moment, when the wind stealth talisman was activated, Zhongshou's entire body merged into the wind. When the shadow stepping sword was activated, a black shadow appeared around Zhongshou's body, covering his body. The sound under his feet was also totally gone. Using the wind, Zhongshou's running speed was like that of a ghost. In the blink of an eye, he had left the region covered by the black fog. However, using the power of these few talismans, he was still like an invisible black shadow moving within the dense forest. In just 10 breaths, he was already 1,700 steps away, following which a person appeared in his field of vision. He was around 30 years old, wearing a white robe. Even in this dense forest filled with mud and rain, he was still untainted by a speck of dust. Around him was a simple spell altar. In front of him were 2 white candles and 3 soul stabilizing incense sticks stuck in the middle. The ground was drenched in beast blood, forming a yin-yang diagram. That white-robed middle-aged man held a peachwood sword and stood in the middle of the diagram. His feet stepped on the left and right yin-yang eyes for yellow talismans floating in front of him. He was chanting something. At this moment, he opened his eyes and looked over, laughing coldly. You actually found this place. So it seems like there are some capable people around the prince. Since you're here, then die. With just a slight point of his finger, those 4 talismans shot out. Large amounts of water and ice spiritual energy gathered in this dense forest and shot through the air. Zhongshou was expressionless, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced. His speed instantly increased by a full 30%. Facing the 4 ice talismans, he swiftly charged forwards. Chapter 38. Amidst the intense wind, the 2 sword glows in the air split into 4. Before the ice rain talisman exploded, it stabbed into the talisman. Following the direction of the spiritual energy, it spun slightly. It caused the 4 talismans to lose their effect. All of them turned into wisps of icy cold air that dissipated in all directions. It froze all the raindrops around. That white-robed male was originally filled with disdain and confidence. Only when the ice talisman was broken did he feel astonished. You are a Xiantian master? No. He had heard of such talisman-breaking methods before. However, such a situation should only appear at the Xiantian master level. Or maybe this person's talisman attainments were several times higher than his. If it was the former, he could easily kill him with a raise of his hand. If it was the latter, then that was even more preposterous. How many talisman techniques could a chi cultivator who was definitely not at the mythic master realm grasp? Even if this person was a dual cultivator, it was impossible. In the next moment, he saw a small person walk out of the white mist. The effects of the wind, stealth, and shadow step talisman were affected by the rebounding force of the ice talisman, and Zhongshou's true body appeared. When that delicate and handsome face was reflected in the eyes of the white-clothed middle-aged man, his face, which was already full of astonishment, was immediately in a trance. This person seems to be that Zhongshou. Is this a substitute or a disguise? He didn't have time to think about it. His left hand suddenly formed a seal, and the peachwood sword in his right hand slashed diagonally, cutting the 2 white candles into 2 pieces. Who cares where you came from? Today, Qi Shao will kill you here. Eagle 1, Snake 3, why aren't you coming out? Protect me. 2 giant balls of mist appeared along with his voice. They suddenly charged out from both sides, mixing with the smoke of the soul, settling incense, and turning into beast forms. A sparrow hawk with a body of 20 feet long soared into the sky, spread its huge wings, and swooped down from the sky. Opposite it was a giant cobra, spitting out its tongue and blocking in front of the spell altar. A few pieces of wind armor formed around his body and surrounded him. Samuraim's eyes squinted, but his body didn't stop at all. He waved his right hand, and a black woodenkin was tossed into the air, just as the sparrow hawk started to dive down. The inconspicuous black wooden jar exploded with a loud bang. A ball of silver light flashed inside, and countless silver-white tentacles burst out like tough iron ropes. Then, like an octopus, it firmly tied up the sparrow hawk, tightly wrapping around it. Zhongsho, who was on the ground, heaved a sigh of relief, and he adjusted his mind to be calm and rational before speeding up once more. Although his dual meridian physique was extremely weak in terms of physical strength, there was one thing that others could not compare to. His chi. Zhongsho was Zhongsho. The shadow stepping sword in his hand was suddenly thrown forward, bringing with it a sharp whistle in the air. Then, with his empty left hand, he drew another blood talisman on the remaining wind stealth sword at lightning speed. Armor break. A faint cold light immediately flowed at the tip of the wind stealth sword. Zhongsho felt an intense pain in his head. Pretty much all his remaining soul power was sucked away, causing him to faint on the spot. He bit the tip of his tongue and forced himself to focus. The killing intent in Zhongsho's eyes had gathered to the extreme. The cobra hesitated for a moment before it tilted its head to the side, avoiding the shadow step sword that was flying through the air. However, in the next moment, a ball of energy exploded under Zhongsho's feet, pushing his body forward. His running speed increased by half again in an instant. Behind him, there were many afterimages. The tip of the wind stealth sword flashed and pierced through the wind armor from an unbelievable angle. It broke through the cobra's weak point and pierced through. When the white shirt man saw the situation, he burst out laughing. Normal beasts would immediately die if they were hit by this sword. However, this cobra was a grade 4 wind snake before it died. When it was made into a spirit beast, it dropped to grade 2. However, since then, this beast didn't have a physical body and inherited some of the abilities of a grade 4 beast. Unless one reached the mythic realm and could damage its soul, normal martial techniques and swords wouldn't be able to harm it. This person's sword could indeed be said to be at the peak of perfection. Even as a spirit master, he couldn't help but clap his hands in praise. Unfortunately, this fellow chose the wrong opponent. Maybe in the next moment, he would be killed by this wind snake spirit beast. Shaking his head slightly, the white-robed middle-aged man looked at the silver-white creature that looked like an octopus beast in the distance with great interest. He was interested in this thing that could trap his spirit beast. However, after only half a breath, that calm and composed expression was replaced by panic. His face turned ashen white, devoid of any blood, only to see the thin and small body in front of him shake his sword slightly. That strong wind snake spirit beast started to collapse and show signs of dissipating. Then, the entire snake body turned into a smoke whirlpool and was sucked away by the tip of the wind stealth sword. Swallow energy. Large amounts of spiritual energy, threads of essence energy, as well as the soul power of a grade 4 beast spirit crazily surged into Zhongsho's body. It caused his soul power ocean to be filled up once more. His dried-up meridians were filled with true chi once more. However, under the control of Zhongsho, all the soul power and internal chi exploded once more, turning into pure energy that surged into his limbs and bones. The sword shadow flashed again, and after a strange turn, a sword light as swift as lightning shot towards the center of the spell altar in an erratic manner. Although the white shirt man was terrified, he didn't panic at all. In the depths of his eyes, a maniacal intent appeared. "You can't kill me." He grabbed a green thumb ring on his left hand and squeezed. Instantly, an energy wall opened up in front of his body. His 2 pairs of sleeves swelled forward. Instantly, hundreds of talismans flew out from his sleeves. Just as he was about to detonate it, he heard a childish and incomparably cold chuckle. Armor-breaking die, only to see a ball of white light shine on the wind stealth sword. In the blink of an eye, it slashed out a few small streaks of light. It actually forcefully broke apart the few talismans in midair. Then, this ball of white light wrapped up the flame and cold energy that exploded out, as well as the spiritual energy, and directly pierced through that energy wall. The most direct and safest way to kill a spirit master was to break his soul ocean. The sword light flashed once more. The white shirt man only felt a slight pain at the center of his brows, like ants biting him, following which a bone-piercing chill swept over. There was the cold feeling of an ice-cold sword stabbing deep into his brain. The white shirt man's eyes slowly lost focus. In the end, he spat out a blood mist from his mouth, spraying onto Zongsho's face. This caused his handsome face to suddenly become a little more sinister. The white-robed, middle-aged man's lifeless eyes were filled with disbelief and bewilderment. You didn't change your appearance, nor is it an illusion. You are Zongsho, the prince of Gantian Mountain. No, the real Zongsho should be a piece of trash who can't cultivate. How can you be him? You actually only cultivated the embryonic and breathing meridians, and your soul power is only at the spirit-focusing upper realm. Qi Xiao, actually lost a kid today. What a joke, what a joke. In this world, there is actually such an anomaly. P.S. My ranking dropped once more. Cry. This month's new book rankings are too tragic. There are so many gods. Please support me. Chapter 39. That white-robed, middle-aged man muttered nonstop. Only after a long while did he slowly become silent. His entire body started to turn cold and stiff. Zongsho heaved a sigh of relief, his tense heart relaxing. At this moment, the few blood talismans he drew on his body to avoid the rain and wind had all dissipated. The heavy rain fell on his body, and in the blink of an eye, his clothes were drenched. Using the energy-swallowing technique, he absorbed a large amount of soul power and essence energy from this person. However, he didn't have the slightest bit of strength left in his body. His entire body fell backwards, lying face up in the mud just like that as he stared at the dark, starry sky. TSK, just a spirit master at the peak of the soul-observing realm. Even 3 months ago, when he fought with Burning Sword Wu Wei, who was a mythic master, it wasn't as tough as today. At that time, with Yin Yang restricting him, Zongsho didn't have to face him head-on, which was why he was able to kill him with one knife. However, today, a soul-observing realm spirit master who was a realm lower than Wu Wei was able to restrict his movements. He was just a little bit away from losing his life here. However, the combat strength of these people who cultivated spiritual techniques was far from that of a martial master. However, once they had enough preparation, spell altars and talismans, as well as the support of a protector spirit beast, their strength would instantly increase by several times. They were far from what cultivators of the same grade could deal with. This person who called himself Qi Xiao was such a person. He had 2 grade, 2 spirit beasts, and his strength wasn't much weaker than Burning Sword Wu Wei. However, although this battle was dangerous, it didn't force him to use his final trump card. Waiting for his twitching muscles to calm down, Zongsho kept the willow mark knife, which only revealed a little cold light, back into his left sleeve. He forced himself to stand up. He originally wanted to use the sword to support himself, but just as he stood up, the wind steel sword in his hand broke into numerous pieces, causing Zongsho to nearly fall down once more. So this talisman sword is just a defective item. I was wondering how these people could be so rich. His mood didn't relax at all, although these swords were defective. But there must be a high-grade spirit blacksmith behind these assassins. Or maybe he had a special connection with those weapon shops that sold talisman weapons. One must know that in the Donglin Cloud Continent, even a defective talisman soldier wasn't something that ordinary people could buy. Walking up to the yin-yang diagram altar, Zongsho unceremoniously took everything from the white-robed middle-aged man. Those hundreds of talismans weren't of a low grade. 20 of them were obviously from the hands of a night, wandering realm spirit master. That peachwood sword was also 300 years old. Naturally, Zhongsho wouldn't reject it. Next would be this person's bag. Inside, there were some spirit-raising pills used to heal soul injuries. Placed in a porcelain bottle, there were roughly 50 of them. Apart from that, there were also some bottles and jars which were commonly used by spirit masters. There were also many Grade 1 and Grade 2 beast crystals. Other than that, there was also a sealed Class 3 soul beast. It's actually the soul of a 5th stage dark chill tiger. Where did this person come from? His wealth isn't any weaker than those inner sect disciples of the Lingyun sect. Duyang Mountain's burning sword Wu Wei and Qi Shao. I'm afraid before my uncle and a few cousins act, they will offend all the powers in the Donglin Cloud Continent. Although that was what he thought in his heart, Zhongsho directly kicked away Qi Zhao's corpse. Then he stood in the middle of the spell altar, stepping on the yin-yang eyes and reigniting the 2 white candles. His hands formed a seal as he chanted a series of prayers. In just a moment, Zhongsho felt that a few spiritual veins underground were being attracted and connected to this place. This was the power of the spell altar, using formations and talismans to connect to the underground spiritual veins to raise the power of the incantation power. This spirit master's spell altar is indeed useful. If one was a martial cultivator, one would have to be at least Xiantian to be able to sense the spiritual veins of heaven and earth. To truly use it for oneself, one would have to be at the ascended grandmaster level. This was the first time he used a spirit master's special method. Zhongshoxin's mind was filled with many thoughts. However, when his soul connected with the spiritual veins gathered in the yin-yang eyes, he didn't have any other thoughts. The huge amount of soul power that was absorbed from Qi Zhao's body mixed with the spiritual energy that surged up from the underground spiritual veins. Instantly, a stifling cold yin energy spread throughout this small patch of forest. Not far away, the silver octopus beast and the sparrow hawk that were tangling with each other instantly stopped. Under this pressure, they didn't dare to make any movements. "Little fellow, why aren't you coming over?" Zhongsho formed another seal and reached out his hand to beckon. The silver octopus beast first resisted, its body shrinking back slightly. However, an even more tyrannical restraining force exploded within his body. It could only helplessly retract its tentacles, its entire body curling up into a ball before unwillingly rolling over. Zhongsho smiled slightly. Actually, when a spirit master subdued a protector beast, it was best when it was in a sealed state and couldn't resist. However, since he dared to release this silver-white beast king, he naturally had confidence. During these 3 months, he had fed it his blood every day. It wasn't for nothing. Pretty much every drop of blood could deepen his control over this spirit beast. A flapping sound spread into his ears, without the silver tentacles restraining it. The Grade 2 spirit beast sparrow hawk started to flap its wings and fly into the sky. Zhongsho scoffed coldly, tossing over a small black jar that he got from Qi Shao, just as the sparrow hawk was about 100 feet away from the ground. At the mouth of the jar, numerous black threads exploded out and tightly bound its body. Then it was forcefully pulled into the black jar. Zhongsho didn't even need to do anything as the jar mouth automatically sealed itself. The protector beast and the spirit master's mind were connected and were the same body. Once the spirit master died, the protector beast would be heavily injured. This was why, although this sparrow hawk king was Grade 2, he didn't need to use any strength to easily subdue it. In just a moment, the silver octopus beast had arrived in front of the spell altar. Zhongsho's expression started to turn serious. He took out a brush and dipped it in a special spiritual ink, drawing a talisman on the skin of the octopus beast. This subduing ceremony would have a certain influence on the future protector beast. Normally speaking, when one subdued a spirit beast, the stronger the soul power one displayed, the more loyal the spirit beast would be. Although his realm wasn't there, his soul was extremely pure. The soul power essence energy that he had extracted from Qi Zhao's body was being used like he was squandering it, not caring about it at all. Feeding it the blood of 3 months in advance was even more effective now. It was enough to subdue this octopus beast king. Next would be the talisman formation to control the protector beast. The more perfect it was, the less restrictions the spirit beast would face in the future. Some special runes could even promote the evolution of guardian spirit beasts. This era didn't have such a concept. However, a few thousand years later, some bored spirit masters would do special experiments. Unfortunately, as a small manager of the National Library, he grasped a few talisman formations. That silver octopus beast wasn't well behaved, continuously struggling and twisting. When it was a quarter of the way through, who knows if it sensed that the talisman formation was beneficial to it, but it revealed a really comfortable expression, allowing Zhongshou to draw on its body. When it was completed, the entire talisman formation slowly faded away. The spiritual ink that was made from Zhongshou's blood, cinnabar, mindstone powder, and also 1,000-year black grass juice would slowly seep into the skin of the spirit beast in the next 3 months. It would slowly seep into the crystal core. Only then could it be considered a true protector beast. Chapter 40. Done. Zhongshou casually tossed aside the brush in his hand. The moment the beast-controlling talisman was drawn, the silver-white octopus beast's attitude towards him was totally different. Its body shrunk and jumped into Zhongshou's hand. Those tentacles were all retracted. Its entire body had turned into a water droplet shape. Its outer appearance was smooth and didn't have the disgusting mucus of normal octopus beasts. It rubbed against Zhongshou's palm, looking really cute. Silver White Beast King, this name is so ugly. Oh, it looks like jelly, so I'll call you Jelly. Looking at it, the little thing in his hand did look like a real jelly. Zhongshou swallowed his saliva, following which he felt that it wasn't right. Oh right, in this era, there shouldn't be jelly. When it fights with people, this name is too weak, and it can't be used as the true name of a spirit beast. No matter what, you are the descendant of a god beast, and your ancestor is famous, so your name has to be more majestic. Oh, let me think about it. I remember that in the future, when you evolve to the extreme, your body will turn purple gold. How about we call you Little Gold? Speaking of which, you eat everything in the world, so your ability is a little similar to my heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique. That silver-white octopus beast didn't understand at all, only rubbing its body against his. Zhongshou laughed, treating it as this little fellow agreeing. Coincidentally, at this moment, a petite person braved the dense rain and sped over from a distance. When she got close, he noticed that it was Chu Shui. Her body was covered in blood, and her clothes were torn. However, she didn't have any injuries. Zhongshou wasn't surprised. If 2 martial cultivators worked together, 1 + 1 was 2. Then when martial cultivators and spirit masters worked together, 1 + 1 was 3, or even 4 or 5. There weren't many people who came to attack this time. 3 7 mythic masters and 10 martial cultivators. Overall, his strength was slightly weaker than Zhongyu and Wu Wei's. However, along with this soul-observing realm spirit master, it would increase their combat strength by a full 50%. However, once Qi Shao died, Yin Yang and Chu Shui, whose strength had greatly increased, would naturally be able to easily deal with their opponents. Su Chu Shui was unable to remain calm. Looking at Zhongshou's weak appearance, she was startled. It was only when he realized that there wasn't a single wound on his young master's body that he heaved a sigh of relief. In the next moment, her gaze was attracted to the item in Zhongshou's hand. Her eyes were filled with doubt. Young master, this is my protector beast. Zhongshou smiled proudly. Its name is Shao Jin. Isn't it very imposing? Chu Shui was stunned. She didn't know what the name Shao Jin had to do with the word imposing. However, this did not stop her from thinking. She rolled her eyes and roughly guessed the origin of this thing. Is this the mutated octopus beast of the silver-white beast king? Young master, are you really going to treat it as a protector beast? I heard that a spirit master can only take in 5 to 20 protector beasts in their lifetime. Even a god master after the true image realm can't change that. It seems like there are even fewer people like us who cultivate both spirit and martial arts. Zhongsho shook his head solemnly. Do you think that this fellow is useless and won't be able to help me in the future? Although Little Gold was only at the second rank, it was somewhat intelligent. When Zhongsho said useless, it immediately jumped in Zhongsho's palm in protest. Su Chushue's mouth twitched. The octopus beast was publicly acknowledged as the weakest and least intelligent beast in the world. Such a protector beast, even after mutating, would not have much of a future. In the next moment, the corner of Zhongsho's lips curled up. Shui, do you know what the earliest ancestor of the octopus beast was? What bloodline did it inherit? The earliest ancestor of the octopus beast? I remember that it was a god beast Wanxiang. It has tens of thousands of changes and can transform into anything. Legend has it that when it turns into a black dragon, it can compete with the black dragon in water. When it turns into a fire phoenix, it can compete with the fire phoenix in fire. Out of the ancient god beasts, it was the most weird and indiscernible, seen as a top god beast. Unfortunately, it fell during the Desolate Era. When Chu Shui said that, she was suddenly shocked. She looked carefully at the silver fruit ball in Zhongsho's hand. She was wondering if this fellow could evolve into that Wanxiang. A moment later, she scoffed in disdain. Young master, if it isn't Shui, I don't believe it. But this octopus beast can evolve into Wanxiang. That is preposterous. It's okay. Spirit masters do have many protector beasts, but only one or two can be used at the same time. It depends on the strength of their soul power. It doesn't matter if one or two spots are wasted. Zhongsho shook his head, too lazy to say anything more. The little fellow in his hand could really evolve into a god beast in the future. It was so close to having the true Wanxiang bloodline. Unfortunately, its foundations weren't stable and it failed. However, even if he said all this, Chu Shui wouldn't believe him. He formed another hand seal with his hand, and Little Gold's body automatically spread out. Like a layer of skin, it wrapped around Zhongsho's hand. Then, it wriggled upwards and disappeared into his sleeves. Oh right, I remember that Shui didn't have a suitable protector beast by her side. Yes, I didn't. Our tiger cat race trained in martial arts. In the past, we didn't have any spirit masters. At the start, the ruler said that he would find a top spirit beast to be my protector beast. However, not long later, something happened to the ruler. Speaking of which, Chu Shui's face dimmed. Actually, it isn't much. In the future, I will be able to find a suitable spirit beast. Before she finished, Chu Shui saw a silver wooden jar being tossed over. Taking a look at it, her face was filled with surprise. This is a grade 3 dark chill tiger, and it is a spirit beast? The dark chill tiger grew up in the north and was the king of beasts. Furthermore, it loved the cold. Its fur, claws, and teeth were all trained to be sharp and tough in the harsh environment. If one didn't reach the Xuanwu ancestor realm, one wouldn't be able to kill a grade 5 dark chill tiger in the snow. Even if the dark chill tiger's soul was lowered by 2 grades, its strength was still really strong. Actually, it wasn't the strongest amongst the beasts. However, as a tiger cat, it was compatible with Chu Shui's tiger cat bloodline. To Chu Shui, it was the most suitable. Seeing Shui happy, Zhongsho was also happy. He originally wanted to give the sparrow hawk to her. However, thinking about how Shui was a dual cultivator, he gave up on that thought. Although the sparrow hawk was good, being able to fly high and look into the distance, it could also block enemies from spying on them. In the future, when its body grew to 40 feet, it could be ridden. However, in terms of combat strength, it wasn't good enough to be a protector spirit beast. Furthermore, this sparrow hawk was currently heavily injured. Just as the two of them were speaking, outside of the forest, another person floated to the side of the spell altar. Taking a close look at the corpse on the ground, Yin Yang's thick brows instantly furrowed. Was the prince injured? Also, who is this person? His clothes seem a little familiar. Chu Shui's face instantly flushed red. She rushed over to take a look at the situation on Zhongsho's side. However, due to the dark chill tiger in her hands, she had pretty much forgotten about this matter. Zhong Shou was startled as he took out the peachwood sword. On the sword body, there was a pigeon mark. This person just said that his name is Qi Xiao. Qi Xiao. So it's him. Yin Yang's face jumped, revealing a look of understanding. His expression was like he heaved a sigh of relief, but also like he had a huge headache. His eyes were filled with confusion. This person's master is someone from the Central Cloud Continent. I heard that he is a return to his Sun Realm Spirit Master. He came to our Donglin Cloud world to avoid trouble. Although it is a little problematic, in such a short time, Qi Zhao's master probably won't be able to find us. However, who was it that invited this person here? P.S. Third day 3 update, but this recommendation and click-through isn't good enough. Continue to ask for votes. Chapter 41. Zhong Shou laughed coldly. Choosing such a dishonorable method of ambushing and assassinating and dying because his skills weren't as good as others. If Qi Zhao's teacher wanted face, he definitely wouldn't have come to find him. However, thinking about it, that God Emperor hadn't appeared in this era. All the 5 continents and 16 islands of the Cloud World were filled with bloodshed and endless battles. As long as one didn't like someone, one could pull out a blade and snatch whatever one liked. The strong could rule everything. The bigger the fist was the law. Apart from those big sects that called themselves righteous sects, who would talk about rules with you. Only when the God Emperor unified the world and set rules would the martial cultivators and spirit masters of the future be restricted. However, the return to Sun Realm spirit masters of the Central Cloud world wouldn't be able to come to Donglin Cloud Continent to seek revenge. As for who ordered this person, it was a headache. There were too many people who could have plotted to kill him. Thinking about it, his identity was really filled with enemies laughing bitterly. Zhong Shou skimmed over this matter, sizing up Yin Yang. How are your injuries? How many people died there? Are there any survivors? His injuries were more serious than Shui's. Tens of wounds, some of which were still bleeding. However, Yin Yang's spirit was extremely strong, as if nothing had happened. As expected, Yin Yang skimmed over his injuries, his brows furrowing. A total of 12 people, all killed. They were all death warriors, hiding poison. Shui and I captured 3 people in total, but none of them survived. There was also a mythic master who escaped. I couldn't catch up. Zhong Shou sighed. Luckily, when he asked, he didn't have much hope. Following which he turned his head and looked out of the forest. How are our losses? Speaking of losses, Yin Yang's thick brows were furrowed together. His face was filled with bitterness, but when he spoke, his words were still concise. Our losses are huge. Only when Zhong Shou was carried by Chu Shui and returned to the main road did he know what Yin Yang meant when he said that their losses were huge. Out of the 16 cloud stepping foals, a total of 4 died. The rest were lightly injured. Luckily, these horses ran at the front and didn't take much of the impact. The cloud crossing chariot was also completely deformed, smashing a huge hole in the ground. However, this carriage was really sturdy, as expected from being made of steel. The cloud crossing carriage, which was 10 feet long and 50,000 kilograms in weight, was flipped 300 feet into the air before falling down. It actually didn't fall apart. Only the steel parts of the carriage were slightly twisted. From this, one could imagine how sturdy the cloud crossing carriage was. Zone test. SSSS, TSSSS. On the other hand, a cloud-crossing carriage forged by a spirit blacksmith might not even be able to buy one with 1,000,000 taels of silver. To blowzazizz. How many explosive flame talismans did those fellows use? Zhong Shou first looked to the side, at the huge hole in the middle of the road, 500 feet wide. Luckily, the spiritual formation at the bottom of the carriage reduced a large portion of it. If not, just the force of the impact would be enough to kill him and Yin Yang in the carriage. Naturally, the reason why they were able to keep their lives wasn't because those people showed mercy. It was because once the number of explosive flame talismans exceeded the number, or if it was other high-grade talismans, it would cause a spiritual energy wave. Chu Shui and Yin Yang sitting in front would definitely sense it. What was worse was that this was probably just a test by those people. They most probably just wanted to see what zone Weiran had left, what kind of people were still standing behind him, and what kind of reaction would they have. If it was a Xiantian cultivator or a knight wandering realm spirit master who personally acted, they could only wait to die in today's battle. Walking around his carriage once more, only then did Zhong Shou heave a sigh of relief. The spiritual formation wasn't damaged much, and just needed some slight repairs to be able to continue traveling. At least rushing to Xiaoyuan City wasn't a problem. The stainless steel and blacksmiths produced there were enough to temporarily repair the carriage, following which he felt his heart hurt. He didn't have many beast crystals on him. Luckily this time, he had replenished a lot from Qi Xiao. The total value was around 500,000 silver. There was also that grade 3 dark chill tiger. Just this spirit beast was worth 3 times that of the carriage. This time, he did not suffer a huge loss. All right, Zhong Shou suddenly thought about something, turning around and continuing the topic that was interrupted. Yin Yang, do you remember that in the past my father arranged a fiancée for me? Her father was the city lord of Xian Mountain City. Xian Mountain City was called a city, but it was actually a country. It was built on top of Xian Mountain, 50 miles around. Within 1,000 miles, all the big and small human towns were under its control. Its power even reached 3 provinces. The city lord was also a half-monster. In Zhong Shou's memory, this person's strength was only weaker than Gantian Mountain. He was also close to Zhong Weiran. When Yin Yang heard that, his face dimmed as he shook his head. Prince, it's best if you don't pin your hopes on that Xian Mountain City. I heard that the Xian Mountain City princess has always been against this marriage. Recently, even his parents had an ambiguous attitude towards him. These few years they didn't ask about you at all, so I know a thing or two. Zhong Shou only felt his body relax. Even those losses just now didn't hurt as much. What he hated the most was this kind of unclear involvement, using 2 hours to repair the spiritual formation of the carriage. He also cleaned up all the battle marks. When Yin Yang once again drove the carriage forwards, it was already 3 hours later. Just as the tattered carriage disappeared at the end of the road, a voice rang out from behind the carriage. 2 people suddenly rushed over from the distance, one in front and one behind. One was close to middle age, the other was a teen. Their faces were hidden in the rain and couldn't be seen clearly. Only 2 red palm marks could be seen clearly. Who was it that set up this killing trap? Carefully looking around, Feng Zhao's face was in deep thought. At this moment, it is raining heavily. The water element's spiritual energy is at its peak. To blow up such a deep hole, at least 50 high-grade explosive talismans were used. Looking around at the trees and leaves that were destroyed by the sword energy and fist wind, his eyes narrowed. Feng Zhao's pupils constricted. There are at least 4 mythic masters fighting here for 15 minutes. 2 of them died. Apart from that, there should be a spirit master. Zhongling knew that Feng Zhao was experienced, but at this moment she was still shocked. However, in the next moment she laughed coldly. Who knows who it is? There are too many people who want my cousin to die, and there are also many who want to protect him. Anyways, it can't be our men. Feng Zhao shook his head, his body like a ghost as he sped into the dense forest. A few minutes later, he stepped out once more. However, his face was ashen white. The spirit master who attacked is at the peak of the spirit observing realm. If I'm not wrong, this person is most likely that Qi Xiao. From what I see, this battle should be within 10 breaths, a fatal sword through the brain. Qi Xiao. I heard that this person had a good relationship with Zhong Yang in the past and treated him as a friend. However, this person also has some relationship with people from Blazing Flame Mountain. We can guess that Blazing Flame Mountain framed him, or maybe Zhong Yang purposely did it to use this person's identity to confuse the public. Zhongling muttered softly for a moment before coming back to her senses, finally realizing the main point of Feng Zhao's words. Her expression also changed. You just said that within 10 breaths, a fatal sword through the brain? The person who attacked is a Xiantian expert? Aren't the few people who are secretly protecting my cousin already under surveillance? Where did this person pop out from? Feng Xiao shook his head slightly. As for the situation, I don't know. I only know that killing a spirit-observing realm spirit master in one sword, even a Xiantian master would find it hard to do. This situation is a little weird. The strength of that Zhongsho's side probably exceeds our expectations. If we have no choice and need to personally attack, we will need to add more people. His words were filled with doubt. The changes at the foot of Pill Spirit Mountain, as well as the situation here today, all of this made them uneasy. Chapter 42. Heavy rain poured down, just as Feng Xiao and Zhongling were discussing uneasily. Within the dense forest, there was a petite figure standing in front of 10 over corpses. It looked like a girl. Her body was like an illusion, like mist. Her face shape was good, and her star-like eyes were filled with excitement as she looked around. Those corpses were all burnt. Apart from some injuries, one couldn't see anything else. However, the outline of the spell altar was still there, and the broken branches and leaves around proved that there had been an intense battle here. It was obvious that the person who cleaned up the traces and the corpses didn't put much effort into it. The woman's gaze, however, was fixed on a medium-sized corpse from the start to the end. Her gaze moved, and she smiled. It looks like a sword slaying the soul, but it doesn't. Is this a trap? Interesting. This time, I really saw something interesting when I came out. The girl laughed for a while before raising her head, her face filled with curiosity. It looks like a Xiantian expert, but also like someone who had just entered the inner breathing realm. Who is this person? On the speeding carriage, Zhongsho suddenly sneezed. He felt a chill invade his body, causing him to frown. Usually when he had such a feeling, it was a bad omen, like something bad was about to happen. Could it be that my previous plan backfired? His brows furrowed as he thought about it. Zhongsho denied this guess. Using the corpses and the scene as a disguise to create a Xiantian expert, it was best if it could scare those people, but it didn't matter if it couldn't. Shaking his head, Zhongsho continued to focus on the matter at hand. In front of him was a yellow talisman with blood-red lines drawn on it like a ghostly talisman. However, if one looked closely, one would notice that these lines were 70% similar to the last luck word of the 12 god talismans on the god talisman mountain. However, each stroke was crooked, and it was worse than the words of a 3-year-old child. Zhongsho's delicate brows were also bent, and his eyes were filled with surprise. This god talisman seed can actually help me draw the god talisman. This Dao talisman was actually not a success. It failed at the last step. However, Zhongsho felt that the reason why he had failed was because he lacked a bit of soul force. Without hesitation, Zhongsho took out all the bee spirit stones and the sealed sparrowhawk. But before that, there was another matter that required his attention. Wrong. When he took a step forward, his body leaned half an inch to the left. Raise your right arm by 3 inches. Besides Zhongsho, Su Chu Shui was practicing her sword moves over and over again in a few simple stances. After hearing Zhongsho's words, she immediately jumped up, but her small mouth slightly curled up, and she said with some dissatisfaction, "Young master, you didn't even look at it just now." How do you know Shui is wrong? Zhongsho didn't even raise his head. He calmly laid out a piece of talisman paper. Nonsense. People who practice martial arts have to be observant and alert to all directions. If I say you are wrong, then you are wrong. You are the one who said you wanted to ask me for advice on swordsmanship. Are you not going to listen to your master's words so quickly? Chu Shui held her breath, following which she stuck out her small chest. Then why does this sword have to lean half an inch and raise my right arm by 3 inches? What sword theory is this based on? It's just the immortal guides the way. Everyone practices it like that. Zhongsho sighed softly. He knew that this little kitten wouldn't be so easily convinced. Putting down the brush in his hand, Zhongsho picked up an ordinary steel sword beside him, following which he smiled slightly. Then watched carefully, just as Chu Shui's expression was stern, and she revealed a wary expression. Zhongsho's body suddenly shook. from being still to moving. With one step, the sword light had already stabbed over. It was clearly the same movement as before, but with a slight change. There was an inexplicable charm to it. As if a gust of wind was blowing, the sword light broke through the limits of human strength. With a sharp whistle, the sword was already in front of her. The green and white sword body reflected a few rays of brilliance, shining towards her eyes. For a moment, she couldn't see clearly the sword force piercing through the air. With a sharp clang, Chu Shui retreated more than 10 steps. Her small face had already turned the color of paper. With lingering fear, she stared at Zhong Shou. At the last moment, she finally managed to block the sword. However, the huge force from the sword made her almost unable to hold the sword. Her right hand, which was holding the sword, was still trembling slightly. If Zhong Shou's internal breath was a little stronger and the speed of his sword was a little faster, this sword could have taken her life. This is really the Immortal's guidance. Young master, you didn't lie to me, did you? Carefully recalling each of Zhong Shou's movements just now, Chu Shui only confirmed after a long while that the sword was indeed the Immortal's guidance. Her pale cheeks immediately flushed red. How can it be fake? For some reason, Zhong Shou's expression was also a little uncertain. The look in his eyes when he looked at Chu Shui was extremely strange. Fortunately, after a few breaths, he calmed down. Do you understand? A slight change in the posture may mean the strength exerted and the speed of the sword will increase or decrease accordingly. However, this sword technique is not always the same. The wind speed, the terrain, and even the light can be used. Chu Shui seemed to understand something, nodding her head like she didn't fully understand. His eyes shone brightly. His gaze towards Zhong Shou was filled with respect and worship. Zhong Shou smiled secretly. In this era, this sword technique was called the Immortal's Guidance. It had many other names. However, 10,000 years later, it was called the Small Step Oblique Stab. After more than 10,000 years, the conclusion of countless martial arts practitioners, combined with the human body mechanics, the improved sword technique had surpassed the so-called Immortal's Guidance by too much. In terms of sword theory, it was far superior to this era. It was more than enough to frighten this little girl. However, Zhong Shou's face did not show the slightest bit. He still kept a straight face and said, "Understood. Then practice the sword according to what I said." Chu Shui immediately panicked. She lifted the sword again and practiced the Immortal's Guidance in an orderly manner. However, this time, she followed Zhong Shou's instructions exactly. As expected, there was a sword whistle. Be it the speed or power, it exceeded Zhong Shou's. At the tip of the sword, there was a little bit of energy, causing the sword attack to be even sharper. Chu Shui was startled at first. Then, a look of joy appeared on her face. The way she looked at Zhong Shou was filled with more and more respect. Zhong Shou nodded slightly. He slowly placed the sword down and turned around to pick up the weasel hairbrush. However, before he started to write, he hesitated. After a short while, a bitter smile appeared on his handsome face. However, Shui, in the future, you just need to familiarize yourself with those martial arts techniques. As for sword theory, fist theory, etc., don't bother about them. You don't need to learn from me. Chu Shui's sword stopped once more. This time it was really weird. Her face was filled with grievance, and she was about to cry. Young master, you don't want to teach me anymore. It isn't that I don't want to teach you, but even if I did, it would be useless. Shui, do you know what intuition is? Seeing that Shui still didn't understand, Zhong Shou sighed. He thought back to not long ago. The sword that he had predicted would definitely not be blocked. Shui, just now did you instinctively know that you had to do that to block me? This intuition can also be said to be battle instinct, battle intuition. In other words, Shui, you are much stronger than those brainless beasts that only rely on their instincts to fight. What sword theory, fist theory, and the mysteries of the martial path? In front of you, Shui, they're all trash. Chu Shui nodded her head in a daze. Being praised, she was a little happy. However, her head was filled with black lines. Young master, you must be indirectly saying that Shui is dumber than those beasts. right? Zhongsho couldn't help but click his tongue, a weird expression on his face. How rare. Shui actually understood. Chapter 43. In the end, Zhongsho spent a lot of effort to take out the spiritual breathing fist to teach her. Only then was he able to coax the furious Chu Shui into smiling. After Chu Shui left, Zhongsho once again started to draw that luck word god talisman. This little cat's combat instincts are so strong. Her strength and speed are also terrifyingly strong. Using the talent of the tiger cat race to explain it doesn't work. Could it be that it really was the legendary combat martial body? Kiki, if I had her ability, why would I need so much time to study the sword theories of martial arts? It really makes one envious and jealous. The so-called intuition of a martial artist was that in battle, one instinctively knew what to do to benefit oneself the most. Right now, Chu Shui was still stuck at the most shallow level, but she had already displayed shocking talent. As long as she did some targeted training in the future, her combat ability would improve by leaps and bounds. As for Zhongsho, he was a classic example of using his own intellect and experience to analyze in battle. It was tough to judge which was better and which was worse. However, the former needed to spend much more effort than the latter by several times. Sighing for a moment, only then did Zhongsho calm down. With just one palm, he smashed the seal on the black ironkin beside him. Activating the energy swallowing technique, he directly swallowed all the soul power and essence energy of the sparrow hawk within the can. Zhongsho's body instantly increased in soul power. Wisps of excess soul power flowed out of his soul, causing his eyes to be dyed with a faint layer of purple. His right hand decisively started to draw on a yellow paper. Without the help of the god talisman stone steel, the entire copying process became much more difficult. Zhongsho could only follow the god talisman seed in his soul ocean to allow the tip of the brush to sweep across the spiritual energy veins, as well as the layers of heaven and earth obstructions. He went all out to not cause the talisman lines to deviate too far. As expected, it is the god talisman. This soul power is being consumed so quickly. The essence, energy, and soul power provided by Grade 4 God B-Soul is actually not enough. Without hesitation, Zhongsho reached out with his hand and grabbed those few Beast Spirit Stones. The heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique sucked in, and the Beast Spirit Stones in his hand were all crushed into dust. His soul ocean, which was originally showing signs of drying up, was instantly filled up. Threads of soul power were guided into the tip of the brush in his hand to gather and draw the talisman. When the last stroke was completed, the entire yellow talisman shone with a 7-colored glow. It wasn't like when other god talismans were drawn, it would cause heaven and earth to change, except the brush in Zhongsho's hand exploded into numerous pieces. Zhongsho heaved a sigh of relief, focusing on the god talisman in his hand. Although the words were ugly, when the talisman was filled to the brim, was filled a unique to the talisman. On the whole of it, it didn't look. However, what was the use of this luck talisman after it was drawn? Thinking about that, Zhongsho's eyes were at a loss, revealing a troubled expression. Although he had also successfully copied the last luck heavenly talisman in his previous life, he had only managed to copy it. He wasn't a spirit master, and the talisman he drew at the celestial martial realm had no effect at all. He also didn't understand the true meaning of this god talisman. Even the entire God Emperor game, no one used similar god talismans. Today, he truly understood the meaning of the talisman left by the Lingyun Grandmaster. However, within it, misfortune is where fortune is where misfortune hides, as well as misfortune and fortune have no door and can only be summoned by oneself. Good and evil will be repaid like a shadow. Similar to the concept of merit and virtue, it really gave one a headache. He also didn't understand what the use of this luck talisman was. It seems like I need to find someone to test the effects of this talisman, This luck talisman was the most special one out of the 12 god talismans in his soul ocean. Not only did he obtain the most complete seed, he could also choose the amount of soul power he needed to draw the talisman. It could be large or small, and there were a total of 9 levels. What Zhongsho could draw naturally required the least amount of soul power, and the effect of the talisman was naturally the lowest. It could last for roughly half an hour. However, if he didn't use it, he wouldn't know what its ability was. Frowning and taking in a deep breath, Zhongsho kept all the talisman drawing tools. The remaining god talismans were far from being perfect. To draw even the simplest 5-element god talisman, he had to wait until he reached the Xiantian realm. With his current focused state, he didn't even need to think about it. At this moment, what he cared about the most was the talisman in his hand. 2 hours later, this broken cloud crossing carriage, pulled by the remaining 12 cloud stepping foals, arrived at Xiaoyuan City. Just as they got close, the wind gale formation that was fixed in the carriage totally collapsed. Luckily, this place was not far from the city gate. Zhongsho had never been to this famous eastern mining capital in the game. However, Yinyang was familiar with this place. As soon as they entered the city, Zhang Xian led them to a street filled with all kinds of blacksmiths and armor shops, as if he was very familiar with the place. Not only did they sell farming tools, but they also sold various metals that were mined. Pieces of forged steel and red copper were neatly placed in the various shops. Amongst them, there were some that sold cloud crossing carriages. However, there were very few shops that had the ability to create such a huge item, only the few that looked the brightest. Standing at the entrance of the street, Zhongsho suddenly thought about the talisman in his sleeves. His gaze immediately shifted between Yin Yang and Chu Shui, hesitating. Anyways, he didn't dare to use himself as a test subject. Yin Yang's body shuddered, as if he had sensed something. He cautiously looked back at Zhongsho, then decisively took a few steps to the side and said, "Young master, wait here. I'll go ask around to see if there are any spirit blacksmiths who can repair that carriage." Before he finished, Yin Yang's body had already disappeared into the endless stream of people. Zhongsho felt regretful and could only look towards Chu Shui with a fervent gaze. The latter's body couldn't help but shudder, and for some reason, she felt a chill. However, she didn't know the reason, so she asked curiously, "Young master, why are you staring at me like that?" Zhongsho coughed dryly, silently pasting the luck talisman that he had painstakingly drawn onto Chu Shui's back. He acted calm. "Uncle Ian will probably take a long time. Since we have nothing to do, let's go in and take a look." In his heart, he was thinking about the hundreds of talismans that he had taken from Qi Shao. If he sold those that he didn't need, he could exchange them for some beast crystals and beast spirit stones that he lacked. Chu Shui didn't notice Zhongsho's actions. Instead, she felt that what Zhongsho said made sense. "We should go in and take a look. If we have a branch of the Sanlu Bank, we can take out some money. We need money to buy cloud stepping foals and repair the carriage." Luckily, when the ruler asked us to go to Linhai College to fetch young master, he also left 4,000 grade 3 beast crystals in the bank. However, young master, you have used too much of the beast crystals on you. Zhongsho was instantly shocked. He knew it. As the monster king of Gantian Mountain, how would his father not have made arrangements for him after he died, leaving him, her only beloved son, all alone and helpless outside? As for Chu Shui's grumbling, Zhongsho acted like he didn't hear it. Chapter 44. The branch of the Sanlu Bank was in the middle of this street, and they could see the huge signboard from far away. However, the two of them had just walked tens of steps forward when Chu Shui fell forward with a thud, falling to the ground. Zhongsho was stunned at the sight. The reactions of cultivators were quick, especially Chu Shui, who came from the tiger cat race. The chance of her falling while walking was 1 in a million, pretty much impossible. However, at this moment, she fell to the ground for no reason. Chu Shui's face turned red from embarrassment to her ears. Just as she was about to stand up, she suddenly exclaimed. After patting the dust off her body, She picked up a small red bag from the ground, opening it to take a look, only to see that it was filled with a golden glow. It's a money bag. There's so much money inside, 10 gold, 700 silver notes, and a grade 1 beast crystal. Young master, who do you think dropped this? I have to return it to that person later. As she said that, Chu Shui walked forwards. Just as she was focused on counting the money, a huge basin fell down from the building beside them. It hit the bullseye, smashing onto Chu Shui's head. The basin was instantly smashed into pieces, and a thread of blood flowed from Chu Shui's forehead. Rage flashed in her eyes. However, in the next moment, she exclaimed as she took out a finger-sized black fruit core from the soil. Young master, what is this thing? It looks like the seed of some spiritual wood. The spiritual energy inside is really strong. The corner of Zhongshu's eyes twitched slightly. This core-like thing was obviously the seed of a 1,000-year lightning apricot. Any spirit master below the out-of-body realm would treat it as a top treasure. Be it crafting spiritual artifacts or making medicine, this item had a lot of use. It should be that when the owner of the plant took the soil, he accidentally mixed this black fruit core into the soil. In his heart, he was wondering if this was the ability of the luck talisman. She had tripped for no reason and picked up 3,000 taels worth of treasures. After being smashed by the potted plant, he obtained a 1,000-year-old thunder apricot seed. The true meaning of the talisman saying, misfortune is a blessing in disguise, and a blessing in disguise was indeed true. Thinking of this, Zhongshu's expression could not help but become extremely strange. He did not know whether to be depressed or happy. In any case, he was extremely glad that he didn't treat himself as a test subject. Before he could figure it out, another sword flew towards him from the side. This time, Chu Shui dodged in time. She narrowly dodged to the side. However, when a long sword slashed past, it cut off Chu Shui's right sleeve. From the street entrance to the branch of the Sanlu Bank, there was a total of 1,700 steps. However, throughout the entire process, the situation did not stop. Zhongshu did not say a word. He was silently taking notes. Chu Shui fell a total of 4 times. She picked up 11,000 silver and 2 night pearls. She was smashed by the potted plant in exchange for a 1,000-year-old thunder apricot seed. She was nearly stabbed by the flying sword. The owner of the sword took the initiative to compensate her with 1,000 silver worth of clothes and 3,000 silver to calm her down. On the way, she was hit by a carriage. Luckily, she was unharmed. However, the owner of the carriage also lost a cloud stepping full. This was really misfortune is a blessing in disguise, and a blessing in disguise. When the two of them finally stepped into the entrance of the Sanlu Bank, Chu Shui's face was filled with tears. Zhongshu tried his best to act as if nothing had happened. His face was expressionless. Young master, there must be a god in this world, right? Did Shui do something wrong? Nonsense. How can there be a god in this world? As a martial cultivator, we should be strong and confident. Why should we believe in gods? Even if the ancient Hongming god that the Taoist spirit masters talk about and the Buddhas that the Buddhist faction talks about really exist, martial cultivators like us should have a fearless heart. So what if there's a god? When martial cultivation is trained to the extreme, what kind of god can't be destroyed? Then why is Shui so unlucky? For no reason. She was tripped, slashed by a sword, hit by a carriage. If it isn't a god, then is there a spirit causing trouble? How infuriating! If I catch it, I will chop it into pieces. Zhongshu nearly burst out laughing. He barely managed to hold it in. Guilt rose up in his heart, but he made up his mind that he couldn't let Schwinn know about the luck word god talisman. Luckily, maybe because the effects of the talisman had disappeared, nothing similar happened again. He smoothly took out 100 grade 3 beast crystals from the Sanlu Bank. The wealth that Zhong Weiran had saved for him was far more than that. Apart from silver and beast crystals, there were some spiritual artifacts and talisman weapons. There were even secret books from the Zhong family. However, they were all stored in the Sanlu Bank, the main branch in Donglin Cloud Continent. He needed to go over there to get them. The two of them exchanged for some beast crystals and soul stones that Zhongsho needed for cultivation. They also bought 3 similar-looking but sharper pine pattern wind swords. Just as they were about to look at other places, Zhongsho's body suddenly stopped, standing in the middle of the street. He only felt an icy cold gaze being cast over. There were many people around him, but couldn't give him any warmth. A bone-chilling cold intent seeped into his heart, causing his face to turn ashen white. He looked around, searching carefully, but he couldn't find where that gaze came from. Chu Shui also noticed that Zhongsho's expression wasn't right. Her brows furrowed. "Young master, what happened?" Zhongsho shook his head slightly, his expression returning to calmness. However, there was still a dangerous glow in his eyes. "Let's go back. Anyways, the earlier we leave Xiaoyuan City, the better. Looks like we've really offended an incredible person this time." Before his words landed, Zhongsho had already taken the lead and walked towards the end of the street. Just as his body passed by the entrance of a weapons shop, his heart skipped a beat. However, his heart skipped a beat, and he turned around and walked in. Not long later, he came out once more, following which he passed tens of shops before he had 3 more flying knives in his hand. Flying knives were common items. In the Donglin Cloud world, most of the martial cultivators had more or less trained in them. However, there were very few people who could craft flying knives into talisman weapons. A talisman knife that could carry a thread of the cloud, shocking God, destroying sword intent, was even rarer. Zhongsho searched an entire street and only found 3 of them. Unfortunately, he could only stay in Xiaoyuan City for 2 days, so he couldn't order one from a spirit blacksmith. If he could have 10 of such talisman knives in his hand and infuse sword intent into them. Even if a mythic master who had reached 9 meridian of the bodily chakra level attacked, he could kill him. When he returned, Yin Yang had already invited the spirit blacksmiths over. There were a total of 4 high-grade spirit blacksmiths. Their soul power cultivation were all at the spirit cultivation realm, a little higher than Qi Shao. Yin Yang paid 20,000 gold to invite the 4 of them over. Although the price was a little expensive, the damage to the carriage was also really heavy. The reason why Yin Yang was willing to pay such a high price to repair the carriage was because he wasn't willing to buy a new one. It was because of the wind wall formation that was laid out within the carriage. A formation that could block Xiantian experts definitely wasn't something that 20,000 gold could buy. He changed a few pieces of the carriage board made of steel and redrew the entire wind-resisting formation according to the diagram that Zhongsho had provided. In just 2 days, the cloud-crossing chariot had a brand new look. At least on the surface, one couldn't see any signs of damage. Yin Yang bought another 8 cloud stepping foals to replace the 2 lightly injured wildebeests. This increased the number of cloud stepping foals pulling the carriage to 18. Only when everything was done did he drive the carriage out of Xiaoyuan City once more. This time, he directly headed to the east, heading straight for the vast land that was filled with mud and swamps. Chapter 45. The 2-inch silver-black flying knife was held between his fingers. Zhongsho wasn't stingy with his energy consumption, using true qi to support his soul power over and over again to cleanse the body of the knife. Pretty much every 30 minutes or so, Zhongsho would absorb a beast spirit stone and beast crystal to replenish the energy in his body and soul. He also used a special beast oil to wipe the body of the knife. This was to prevent the flying knife from being damaged under the continuous tempering of his true qi and soul power. The flying knife in his hand was mainly made of steel, but the supporting material wasn't just red copper. He also added an obsidian and some black iron. The body of the knife was also slightly wider than the willow leaf knife from before. It was slightly uncomfortable to use, but it could still be used. The entire tempering process had already lasted a full 4 days. Zhongsho had used close to 300 grade 1 beast crystals and soul stones. The purpose was to allow him to make these 3 black-colored flying knives reach a level where their minds were connected to his in these short few days. The last time, he used beast oil to wipe the body of the knife, causing the flying knife in his hand, which had become hot due to the impact of true chi and soul power, to return to its normal temperature. Zhongsho used his soul power to sense it, and he saw that the talisman knife in his hand was shaking slightly. It was like he just needed to use a bit more strength, and it would fly out from his palm. Knowing that the time had come, Zhongsho immediately used his soul power to build a bridge. He connected this knife to the cloud, shocking God-destroying sword intent in his dantian. Then, with great familiarity, he imprinted an insignificant sword will into the saber. With the experience from before, Zhongsho was much more skilled this time. In just a moment, the flying knife in his hand changed once more. On the back of the black knife, some patterns appeared. It was like there was a cloud rolling within. Success. With these 3 knives, I can at least have some ability to protect my life. Only that person, thinking back to when he was in Xiaoyuan City, the gaze that spied on him, Zhongsho felt a bone-piercing chill. Unfortunately, in just a few days, even if he had the heaven-devouring energy conversion technique, he still couldn't make much progress in his chi cultivation. He really couldn't rely on it. On the other hand, with the help of the heavenly mirror soul illuminating technique and the power of the 12 heavenly talismans, his soul power had reached the peak of the focused mind realm last night. It caused the soul power ocean to completely stabilize. The next step of cultivation was to observe the soul. As the name implied, it was to observe every corner of one's soul and understand the composition of one's soul. Only then would his own soul not be damaged during the out-of-body stage in the future. Even if they were scattered, they could still find a way to gather back together. However, to achieve this level, one needed to be at least at the day wandering realm. All of this required time to cultivate. However, it wasn't as if there was no way to speed things up. However, this technique was a shortcut that he came up with in the past few days. Whether or not there would be any problems was something that he didn't know, which was why he was still hesitating. Just as he kept the flying knife into his sleeves, Zhongsho saw Shui happily walk in. His expression was one of joy. Just now, Uncle Ian has taken a look. Those people have been shaken off. Young Master is really smart to take such a path. As expected, no one thought about it. As for the wind riding formation, to think those spirit blacksmiths said that they didn't know anything about it. In the end, the speed of the carriage is a full 70% faster than before. When Zhongsho heard that, his expression became more solemn. It was within his expectations that he would be able to shake off those people who were following him. At this moment, within the carriage, the modified wind riding formation could not only control wind element spiritual energy, but could also reduce the weight of the carriage to close to nothing. It could also allow the cloud stepping foals in front to use the wind from the carriage to not only not drag it down, but also increase their speed by 30%. Unfortunately, in this small place, one couldn't buy wind rider foals that were several times faster than cloud stepping foals. If not, this carriage could even rise up 1,000 feet and travel in the air. However, in this endless wasteland swamp that was filled with mud and puddles, if one was not careful, one would fall into it. Even just these 18 cloud stepping foals were enough for them to leave all the people behind them in the dust. However, they had already shaken off those people. However, why was that sense of danger in the depths of his heart still there? Instead, it made him feel a chill down his spine. Zhongsho frowned slightly and stood up. He didn't hesitate at all. He nimbly placed tins of spirit stones and beast crystals all around the carriage. They were all grade 2 and above. Following which, he placed some beast blood, which was taken from the purest grade 3 baby beasts with the most spiritual energy. It was also worth a lot. Zhongsho drew and wrote. In the blink of an eye, he drew a 20 feet circle diagram. This is a spell altar. Chushua looked on quietly at the side. She wasn't sure until Zhongsho placed the incense table and lit the white sandalwood incense. Only then did she confirm that this was indeed a spell altar. Zhongsho's arrangement was slightly different from the spell altars that spirit cultivators usually used. However, The spiritual energy that gathered around for some reason was more balanced and harmonious. Zhongsho stood in the middle of the diagram. He reached out with his right hand, and a silver-white octopus beast that looked like a water droplet appeared in his hand. Little gold, whether or not your master can get out of this calamity depends on you. If I die today, you won't be able to live either. Do you understand? Little Gold was stunned, jumping around in his palm. Zhongsho naturally didn't expect it to understand. He placed this fellow in the middle of the incense table. His hands formed a spell as he chanted. After a short moment, his eyes opened slightly. It caused all the beast spirit stones and beast crystals around to give off a green smoke and yellow light. They followed the talismans that Zhongsho drew and gathered towards the incense table. Little Gold was originally jumping around, but at this moment it quietened down. It allowed the true essence and soul power to wrap around its body. Then it absorbed all of it into its body without being picky. Its entire body swelled up like a balloon. It was originally the size of 2 fists, but now it was several times fatter. When all the soul stones and beast crystals were broken one by one, Zhongsho's eyes lit up. Little Gold's small body seemed like it was about to explode. Zhongsho's eyes shone brightly. He reached out and grabbed the top of Xiao Jin's head. Then, a suction force entered Xiao Jin's body from his palm. In just an instant, a huge amount of essence, energy, and soul power was absorbed by Zhongsho. When it entered his palm, it was clearly split. A portion flowed towards the dantian, while the other entered the shunxiao point at the center of his brows. With Little Gold's body as a sieve, it is buffered and purified once. The essence and soul power he absorbed was indeed many times purer than directly absorbing from the soul stone beast crystal. I can pretty much directly use it. The effect is even better than my first set of energy leading techniques. If I convert and refine all of this true essence, energy, and soul power by myself, I would instantly die. Zhongsho still didn't dare to be careless. Activating the 12 God talismans and the 18 cloud shocking God, destroying sword intense, along with the internal energy guiding technique. He once again purified the essence, energy, and soul power. Until the impurities within were cleared out, Zhongsho allowed it to return to its original position. Within his soul ocean, several giant storms rose up. Until the whirlpool grew close to double in diameter, did it stop. All the essence energy was used by Zhongsho, purposely directed towards his abdomen, seeping in bit by bit to strengthen the foundation and breathing chakras. It covered his palm like a silver-white glove, covering all the way to his elbow. As for the green wind spirit pearl, maybe it was because Little Gold was still unable to absorb it in a short time. Behind his wrist, a small ball protruded out. P.S. Now the 7th place is in danger. Please recommend it to your collection. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.